Okay. I think we should get started. Hey everyone, welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you for joining us for today's event. It's an all-day event, really. Fungi Fest Montreal. This is the second edition of Fungi Fest Montreal, but it's the first edition that we've ever had here at Fourth Space. And it's a mushroom festival dedicated to showcasing, let's say, the magical world of mushrooms to the public and to the Concordia community. And so you should join us for the day, honestly. There's going to be a series of talks throughout the day, as well as some workshops. There's a market, activities for everyone. Thank you for joining us. Now, quickly, just to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube. We are live from Forespace, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And here at Forespace, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions, projects, community initiatives, things happening across the university. And we're running today's event also as a live stream Zoom meeting. Anybody joining us via Zoom, if you have questions, anything like that, just pop that into the chat and our team can help you with that. Those of you here in the space, if you have any questions later on, just raise your hand, we'll bring a microphone over to you. And for our first talk of the day, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Mathias from Mycosphaera. Mathias, bienvenue.
Bonjour à tous, merci beaucoup de l'invitation au Fungi Fest à l'Université de Concordia. Vous parlez tous français ici, je ne suis pas habitué de venir à Montréal, oui, vous comprenez bien, ça marche, ça va être mieux en français pour moi que mon anglais est un peu terrible. Donc aujourd'hui, je vous présente le collectif qu'on est, en fait, on est une entreprise en pré-démarrage, mais une entreprise qui est en fait une organisation à but non lucratif. On vient de base de Québec. Puis, on vous présente aujourd'hui notre projet, notre mission, ce qu'on fait déjà, parce qu'en fait, en ce moment, on s'est rassemblés, mais ça fait longtemps qu'on est en activité. On a rassemblé, en fait, des acteurs du milieu pour converger vers un projet commun. Et si vous vous demandez en cours de route, mais je ne comprends pas trop, qu'est-ce qu'est Mycosphaera, retenez un peu notre slogan, explorer, éduquer, préserver et réseauter. Donc, les acteurs de la mycologie, un réseau au service de la biodiversité, comment s'initier à la science citoyenne. Donc, un peu de nouvelles, en fait, de l'actualité mycologique en Amérique du Nord. On revient tout juste d'un congrès nord-américain, nord-est. En fait, on parle du Northeast Mycological Federation, la NEM. Si vous ne connaissez pas, je vous invite à en prendre connaissance. Et puis, voici des images, en fait, de la NEM. Ça avait lieu à Cape Cod, au Massachusetts. Ça avait lieu il y a environ 2 semaines. Donc, ça a été une occasion pour les mycologues de toute l'Amérique du Nord de se rencontrer de la côte ouest à la côte est. C'est un événement fort qui existe depuis plus de 25 ans. Je vous le recommande d'y aller. Donc, ici, on a des figures importantes de la mycologie. Bien, je vous donne par exemple Alan Rockefeller, qui est un mycologiste nord-américain très réputé, qui a un projet de science citoyenne. On s'inspire beaucoup de ce que font les Américains pour les apporter ici. Mais vous allez voir que le Québec s'en tire très bien aussi, chef de file en fait de la mycologie en Amérique du Nord. Donc, l'itinéraire technique de la présentation, on va d'abord présenter notre collectif. On va vous initier en fait à la photographie scientifique parce que c'est notre mission d'initier à la science citoyenne. Malheureusement, la mycologie est enseignée dans aucun cursus scolaire en Amérique du Nord. Il y a des cours de mycologie, des cours généraux de mycologie. En fait, c'est des anecdotes dans des départements, par exemple, de mycologie médicale, des départements d'agronomie ou de phytopathologie. Mais la science fondamentale des champignons n'est pas enseignée. Il n'y a aucun département de champignons en Amérique du Nord. Et je vous rappelle que c'est en 1969 que les champignons ont été officiellement classés dans leur propre règne. Donc, c'est une compréhension qui a été très récente. Nous, on veut remettre la mycologie avec son piédestal et logie du latin logos, qui signifie science. Donc, c'est de montrer que la mycologie, ce n'est pas que la gastronomie, c'est aussi une science. Et on verra aussi le fongarium et le côté scientifique de la chose. Donc, on vous présente le collectif. Ensuite, la présentation, je pense qu'elle n'était pas supposée être montée comme ça, mais bref, on présente des astuces de photographie. Ensuite, comment monter son fongarium, ça veut dire, avant on appelait ça un herbier, mais ça fait un non-sens, c'est pas un herbier, c'est un fongarium, donc une collection de champignons séchés pour le séquençage génétique. Puis ensuite, on vous parle de partage des données, parce que la science citoyenne doit partager ses données. Donc, voici l'équipe. Nous sommes 7 sur le conseil d'administration provisoire, et l'équipe est déjà en train de grossir. En fait, notre but, c'est de faire du réseautage. Donc, on vous présente un à un peu qui on est pour que vous compreniez quel est notre but et nos forces. Donc, on commence avec David Fortier, qui est doctorant à l'Université Laval. Il est spécialiste, en fait, des composés volatiles, des truffes. Il a fait sa spécialité, en fait, son projet de maîtrise sur les composés aromatiques volatiles de la truffe du Québec, la truffe des Appalaches. En fait, si vous ne le saviez pas, il existe plusieurs truffes au Québec du genre tuber. Ce sont des champignons hypogées. Les champignons hypogées, on en a peut-être une trentaine et plus là, en Amérique du Nord. Et il y en a une qui a un potentiel commercial, c'est la truffe des Appalaches. Jérôme Quirion, qui est un producteur de truffes québécoises, est en production en ce moment au Québec. Il y a plusieurs truffières en production. Donc, David Fortier nous aide beaucoup en fait, à développer le côté scientifique. Ensuite, on a François Guay, qui est le photographe de champignons. Vous allez voir aussi qu'on fait notre force via la photographie. C'est un photographe qui, en fait, a découvert les champignons il y a 2-3 ans et a commencé la photographie il y a 2-3 ans. Et pour dire maintenant que c'est possible de se développer en mycologie en tant que citoyen, aujourd'hui, François parcourt le monde, découvre des nouvelles espèces dans le monde. Et puis, récemment, sa photo a été sélectionnée par le prestigieux magazine du Botanical Kew Garden, qui est l'un des plus, en fait, le jardin botanique le plus important au monde en termes de collection de champignons. Puis, sa photo apparaîtra dans le prochain magazine du Jardin botanique de Londres. En passant, il se spécialise sur les micro-espèces de champignons, donc des espèces qui mesurent en moyenne 1 mm et moins. On a Lucille Berthelot, on a décidé de diversifier en fait les savoirs, de ne pas seulement avoir des gens spécialisés en mycologie, on voulait des gens aussi du domaine artistique parce qu'en fait, on fait beaucoup de pédagogie, vous allez voir. Et puis, Lucille développe le côté artistique. Puis, puisqu'on fait des conférences dans les écoles, des ateliers pédagogiques, on veut développer le côté artistique parce qu'on pense que l'art peut être un bon moyen d'introduire une science qui est compliquée, qui est la mycologie. Donc, Lucille Berthelot, ben, on est fiers de l'avoir dans l'équipe. C'est une étudiante en muséologie. Elle est conservatrice, restauratrice d'œuvres d'art. Elle a étudié en Europe. En fait, elle est française parce qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup de programmes là, en conservation d'œuvres d'art au Québec. Là, ce que je remarque, c'est que les photos, en fait, normalement, il y a une animation. C'est pour ça que les photos s'empilent l'une ou les autres. Malheureusement, on ne voit pas les photos en dessous, mais ce n'est pas grave. Ça, c'est pour vous présenter Joël, c'est notre mascotte, c'est le professeur. En fait, il est professeur de mycologie. Il y a en fait, il y a quelques programmes qui enseignent la mycologie. C'est au cégep de Saint-Félicien. Il enseigne la cueillette sauvage. Lui, il est chargé de cours, en fait, au cégep de Saint-Félicien comme professeur de mycologie. C'est un spécialiste de la taxonomie. Ça fait plus de 12 ans qu'il fait ça. Il est guide naturaliste. C'est aussi quelqu'un qui est très bon en communication, donc c'est pour ça qu'il est enseignant. C'est lui qui est un peu notre mascotte. C'est un musicien, un percussionniste, un guitariste, accordéoniste et c'est un conteur. Donc, il a créé un conte scientifique pour les enfants parce qu'il l'enseigne aussi dans les écoles. En fait, il fait des ateliers que les classes de la maternelle, en fait, jusqu'au cégep. Et en ce moment, il est à l'université de Chicoutimi pour donner un cours d'interprétation du patrimoine naturel. Donc, on est fiers d'avoir Joël dans l'équipe, qui est un très bon vulgarisateur. Il apporte le côté un peu la mascotte de l'équipe. Ensuite, on a Katia Burel, ingénieure en environnement. Elle est siège sur le comité. Vous la connaissez? OK. Vous la connaissez? Bon, bien, Katia Burel, justement, elle est de Montréal, elle est de votre patelin. Elle siège sur le conseil du Cercle des mycologues de Montréal. Si vous ne connaissez pas le Cercle des mycologues de Montréal, je vous invite à intégrer leur rang. C'est là que vous allez apprendre beaucoup. C'est une mycologue autodidacte, très chevronnée dans le domaine. Et puis, on est fiers de l'avoir dans l'équipe. Ensuite, on a Jonathan Casabonne, qui est aussi doctorant en mycologie. Lui, il a étudié la vraie mycologie, mais parce qu'il a étudié en Europe. Et en Europe, en France, ils ont des programmes de mycologie. Il a étudié à l'Université de Toulouse. On est fiers de l'avoir aussi dans l'équipe. En ce moment, il étudie les champignons des écosystèmes boréaux, en fait les champignons souterrains, grâce à l'ADN environnemental. Il fait son doctorat à l'Université du Québec en Abitibi-Témiscamingue et il lutte pour la conservation de la faune. Vous allez voir, c'est une de nos missions centrales que les champignons soient désignés officiellement dans les définitions de la biodiversité parce qu'en ce moment, elle ne l'est pas. Et il a été formé par Guillaume Messartier. Guillaume Messartier, c'est un mycologue professionnel en Europe. C'est l'un des plus grands mycologues d'Europe en ce moment. Il a été formé dans son laboratoire au Muséum d'histoire naturelle de Paris. Donc, c'est un atout très fort pour notre comité scientifique. Puis, c'est lui qui va nous représenter, en fait, dans les missions ambassadrices pour aller démocratiser les champignons, puis, en fait, inscrire dans les lois de protection de l'environnement au Québec et au Canada les champignons comme faisant partie intégrante de la biodiversité. Et je termine par moi-même, le fondateur, en fait, tout ça vient un peu de ma tête, de mes idées, de ma force, de mon réseautage. Moi, ça fait près de 10 ans que je suis dans le domaine des champignons. J'ai commencé par la culture de champignons. On voit, par exemple, ici, je cultivais des cordyceps militaris, des champignons qui parasitent les insectes. Et puis, je me suis mis à la photographie de champignons aussi. Je suis technicien à la base agricole et en bioécologie. Et je me suis spécialisé dans les champignons de manière autodidacte et je suis devenu, par le fait, vice-président du Cercle des mycologues amateurs de Québec. Et si vous ne le saviez pas, bien, le siège social on va dire, de la science au Québec. Ça se passe à Québec et Montréal en particulier, mais vraiment, ceux qui font avancer la mycologie sont principalement à Québec. On va voir leur visage dans quelques instants. Donc, en plus de notre collectif, il y a aussi des gens à travers l'Amérique du Nord qui participent à la mycologie. On a une délégation québécoise et on peut en être fier. René Leboeuf, Roland Labbé, Jacques Landry. Roland Labbé et Jacques Landry, c'est les deux fondateurs de Myco-Québec. Si vous ne connaissez pas le site web de Myco-Québec, je vous invite à aller le voir. C'est une des bases de données les plus importantes occidentales. Je ne peux pas parler pour l'Asie parce que je ne sais pas lire le mandarin pour l'instant, donc je ne sais pas, j'ai pas accès à leur Internet. Mais certainement, les Européens et les Américains peuvent être jaloux de ce qu'on a bâti. C'est l'œuvre de Jacques Landry et Roland Labbé. C'est un travail phénoménal d'une base de données exquise avec les 3616 espèces actuellement répertoriées au Québec. Il y en a plus qui vont s'ajouter cette semaine parce qu'on en découvre. Vous allez voir à chaque semaine de nouvelles espèces. René Leboeuf, c'est une autodidacte chercheure indépendante qui publie dans des articles internationaux avec des chercheurs internationaux. C'est une Québécoise aussi. On est chanceux de l'avoir. Puis on a Alan Rockefeller à suivre. C'est une figure de proue de la science citoyenne nord-américaine. Sigrid Jacob, qui est la présidente du Cercle des mycologues de New York, Todd Elliott, qui est un spécialiste des interactions entre les champignons et les animaux. C'est un doctorant aussi. Il s'est spécialisé dans les champignons hypogées d'Australie. C'est une tête très forte. À 11 ans, 14 ans, il publiait sa première article scientifique. Rick Van de Pol est professeur à l'Université du Vermont. Il milite pour développer la première liste d'espèces rouges en danger dans l'État du Vermont. Et d'ailleurs, on les a rencontrés, ces gens-là. Puis, il risque d'y avoir un partage de connaissances pour s'inspirer de ce que fait le Vermont. Et Noah Siegel, c'est un mycologue de terrain les plus réputés en Amérique du Nord. Je vous invite, il y a 2 livres d'écrits, il vient d'en sortir un. Mushroom of Cascadia. Donc, ce sont des figures à suivre. Si vous voulez vous intéresser à la mycologie, suivez les figures de proue, ça peut vous aider dans. Donc, nos missions, on en a plusieurs. Nous sommes en pré-démarrage. Nous ne sommes pas encore enregistrés, mais nous sommes en activité déjà. Ce qu'on souhaite développer, c'est un site web. On a déjà un site web version 1, on souhaite développer une version 2 qui va être beaucoup plus ambitieux avec des projets d'éducation, d'illustration scientifique, du service conseil pour n'importe quel type d'entreprise qui veut se démarrer en mycologie, que ce soit pour la science ou pour la gastronomie. On cultive le mycélium, on connaît le réseau, on peut mettre en contact. On fait déjà des inventaires scientifiques pour le compte du gouvernement fédéral et provincial en ce moment. On permet le réseautage, c'est la force de notre collectif. C'est un peu notre animal, pas notre animal en fait, mais c'est une figure de mascotte, pas de scout à imaginer, ce ne serait pas un animal, ce serait le mycélium. Parce que le mycélium, c'est un réseau, c'est à l'image qu'on se développe. On se développe en photographie, évidemment, pour la découverte de nouvelles espèces. On souhaite développer une bibliothèque de ressources et le blog, je me répète, et ainsi être dans l'événementiel, comme vous faites d'ailleurs, d'organiser des événements pour permettre le réseautage et le partage de connaissances. Donc, pourquoi étudier les champignons? Bien évidemment, beaucoup d'espèces à découvrir, c'est peu connu. Des molécules bioactives et médicinales à découvrir. Vous savez que les antibiotiques, proviennent des champignons. Ce sont des dépollueurs, ils peuvent faire de la mycorémédiation. Ensuite, le rôle écologique est primordial. C'est la base des écosystèmes terrestres. Et on se rend compte même qu'ils sont impliqués dans les écosystèmes aquatiques. On en reviendra. Ce sont des sources de colorants naturels. On parle des lichens et certains champignons. Gastronomie, chimie des saveurs. Évidemment, les morilles, les truffes, c'est intimement lié à l'histoire de notre gastronomie. Les psychédéliques et la santé mentale, c'est la nouvelle médecine. Ça fait longtemps qu'il n'y a pas de révolution en psychiatrie. On est peut-être en train d'en vivre une. Restez à l'affût. Et la beauté et le mystère, évidemment, ça nous charme, les champignons, les mycomatériaux, et c'est un défi intellectuel. Moi, je dis toujours, il y a des gens qui font des sudoku, des mots croisés, et il y a des gens qui font de la mycologie. C'est le même défi. Donc, ici, on voit, en fait, ces 2 rapports. On a un devis de projet, puis en fait, on a un rapport qu'on a commencé. Ça fait que c'est à la réserve faunique de Cap-Tourmente, c'est un territoire fédéral. On a initié un projet de recherche pour inventorier les champignons. C'est les débuts de pouvoir cartographier qu'est-ce qu'il y a dans nos forêts et ensuite quelles espèces sont rares. On n'a juste pas de données en ce moment, ou très peu. On n'est pas les premiers à faire des inventaires. Myco-Québec en faisait déjà depuis 25 ans. Le Cercle des mycologues de Montréal en ont déjà fait aussi. On récupère la balle au bon, en fait, mais on pousse la chose pour qu'en fait, ça soit connu du droit, ça soit connu de la politique, puis qu'on puisse protéger enfin les champignons, donc les écosystèmes. Et en ce moment, on a un devis de projet qui vient d'être entamé cette année. C'est avec la réserve écologique de la Grande Plaie Bleue. C'est une des plus grandes tourbières du sud du Québec, qui est à Lévis. Donc, des nouvelles espèces qu'on découvre. C'est 2 exemples d'espèces qu'on a découvertes. L'une à Cap-Tourmente, par exemple, Ramariopsis SP, qui veut dire species, on ne connaît pas l'identité. QC01, c'est un nom provisoire, a été découvert. On l'a fait séquencer. C'est une nouvelle espèce. Il faut la décrire maintenant. On a Hirticlavula SP. On n'est même pas sûr du genre. Ça fait que ça pourrait être complètement une nouvelle espèce. Ça fait... j'ai marqué 0,1 cm, mais c'est 0,01 cm. C'est donc 1 mm de grosseur. Fait que vous voyez, les champignons, il faut les chercher des fois très petits. Ici, c'est à Cape Cod. En fait, pendant notre séjour à Cape Cod, pendant la nymphe, on a découvert une espèce qui était inconnue de tous les mycologues qu'on a rencontrés. On leur a présenté l'espèce. Elle est inconnue pour l'instant. Il va falloir la faire séquencer pour savoir si c'est une nouvelle espèce. Donc, une liste de nouvelles espèces. Ça, c'est les photos de François. François parcourt, en fait, il y a 3 pays impliqués, la Malaisie, le Canada, les États-Unis, les 4 régions impliquées dans le monde. Fait qu'on voit que des nouvelles espèces, il y en a à découvrir pour les champignons. C'est un terrain de jeu. Si vous êtes intéressé à participer à la science citoyenne, c'est un terrain facile. On pense que 98% des plantes sont connues, 20% des insectes. Les champignons, on pense que c'est environ 4% des champignons qui sont connus. Donc, une brève histoire de la mycologie. En fait, il faut savoir que la mycologie, ça fait quand même des gens qui militent pour eux. On va commencer avec l'histoire de Roger M. Roger M a été directeur au Muséum d'histoire naturelle de Paris dans les années, il me semble, si ma mémoire est bonne, dans les années 30. Il est décédé maintenant. Roger M, en fait, c'est un pionnier, c'est un ethnobotaniste, c'est un mycologue professionnel. Si vous ne le connaissez pas, en fait, il a préfacé le livre de Silent Spring de Rachel Carson, si je ne me trompe pas. Oui, et donc, il a préfacé son livre dans le temps. C'est un écologiste bien avant son heure. En fait, il était écologiste dans les années 20, donc bien avant le printemps silencieux des années 60. Roger M militait pour la protection des champignons. D'ailleurs, c'est lui qui a fondé l'Union internationale de la conservation de la nature. On voit le logo, l'UICN. L'UICN, vous allez voir passer parce qu'en ce moment, il y a la COP16 qui démarre en Colombie. L'UICN est très développé. René Pomerleau, on est chanceux. Au Canada, en fait, on a des figures de proue. C'est un Québécois. Il a fondé le Centre de foresterie des Laurentides à Québec, qui est le principal centre de recherche en foresterie au Québec. C'est un centre de recherche fédéral. René Pomerleau, en fait, il a fondé le Cercle des mycologues de Montréal et de Québec dans les années 50 parce qu'il trouvait que le Québec, c'était un peuple de mycophobes. On ne connaissait pas les champignons, en fait. Ce savoir-là ne s'est pas transmis de la France à la Nouvelle-France. Et puis, des années de phobie se sont cultivées à travers ça. Je vais juste attendre que la police passe. René Pomerleau aussi, c'est le fondateur de la North American Mycological Association, c'est la NAMA, c'est la grande organisation nord-américaine. Et donc, c'est une figure de proue de la mycologie canadienne et nord-américaine, parce que dans le temps, il n'y avait pas de mycologue en fait au Canada, puis ça a été une science qui a été un peu, qui a pris du retard, mais grâce à vous allez voir des grandes figures, le retard se rattrape au Canada et au Québec. Jean-André Fortin, si vous ne le connaissez pas, c'est grâce à lui qu'on a la multinationale Premier Tech à Rivière-du-Loup. Grâce à lui, il y a un entrepreneur, en fait. Je ne me rappelle pas du nom de l'entrepreneur, mais Jean-André Fortin, c'est un spécialiste mondial des mycorhizes. On lui doit la découverte, en fait, la découverte industrielle de production d'inoculum de mycorhizes. Le Québec, donc le Canada, est un pionnier mondial de production de mycorhizes au monde. Il a été invité par le gouvernement indien. Le gouvernement indien a dit mot pour mot, je le traduis en français, que sa découverte allait sauver l'Inde, parce que l'Inde subit une désertification. Les mycorhizes, ça l'aide aux végétaux à pousser. Et donc, la production industrielle que Premier Tech a fait, dans le fond, a démarré. C'est grâce aux découvertes de Jean-André Fortin. Il est fondateur de l'Institut de recherche biologie végétale à Montréal. C'est une figure de proue de la mycologie québécoise et américaine, nord-américaine. Et Guliana Forcy, si vous ne la connaissez pas, elle siège sur le comité de l'UICN pour la protection de la fonge. Elle a fondé la Fungi Foundation. C'est la première organisation au monde à se dédier à la protection des champignons. Elle siège sur le comité de conservation de la fonge de l'UICN. Guliana Forcy, c'est une figure de proue de la conservation de la fonge et c'est notre aussi source d'inspiration pour nos projets, pour aussi militer dans la même veine d'idées de la conservation des champignons au Québec et au Canada. D'ailleurs, elle a milité pour que le Chili soit le premier pays au monde à inscrire dans leur constitution la conservation des champignons. Donc, mycodiversité en chiffres, entre 2 et 11 millions d'espèces qu'on pense estimer. C'est difficile à estimer. En fait, les vieilles statistiques disaient qu'en moyenne, on découvrait 6 champignons par espèce de plante. Il y a 400 000 espèces de plantes environ sur Terre connues. Donc, on faisait multiplier par 6. Ça nous donnait environ le nombre. Maintenant, on l'a augmenté parce qu'on a découvert, en étudiant par exemple le microbiote des insectes, qu'on découvrait une à plusieurs espèces de levures dans le microbiote, par exemple, des coléoptères. Et donc, si on fait la projection que les coléoptères, c'est environ 10 millions, pas les coléoptères, les insectes, 10 millions d'espèces, et qu'il y a une levure par espèce d'insecte, on démultiplie complètement l'ordre de grandeur. Donc, c'est difficile à estimer, mais ce qu'on sait, c'est qu'on ne les connaît pas assez. Seulement 150 000 espèces découvertes et plus de 3 600 espèces au Québec. Voici la page web de Myco-Québec. Je vous invite à aller voir. Tous les outils sont là pour découvrir nos espèces qu'on a au Québec. Ça, je vais passer très vite parce que là, je regarde le temps. Je ne pense pas avoir le temps de vous présenter ça de fond en comble. Je pense qu'il me reste environ 5 minutes en rafale. Malheureusement, l'empilage, l'animation ne se fait pas, fait que je vais passer à l'autre. Mais ce qu'il vous faut, c'est un appareil photo. Oui, les cellulaires, ça fonctionne, mais c'est vraiment de mauvaise qualité, même si vous avez le iPhone 16 ou le dernier Samsung. Vous n'êtes pas capable d'avoir une longueur focale avec une fermeture du diaphragme qui vous permet de contrôler la profondeur de champ, donc le focus. Puis vu que vous êtes en macro, en champignon, vous allez juste avoir une petite partie au focus. Ça veut dire que les photos ne sont pas très belles. Ça fonctionne pour de la science tant que vous prenez une belle photo. Vous allez voir c'est quoi prendre une belle photo, en fait, une photo efficace. Mais quand vous choisissez les lentilles, il y a 3 types de lentilles standards. Vous avez les courtes, les standards et les longues. On parle de courtes et standards, donc des 35 à 60 mm. Puis si vous allez dans l'ultra macro, vous tombez avec une longueur focale de 90 mm. Les rapports de grossissement, pour que ça soit du vrai macro, il faut que ce soit un rapport de 1-1. Puis les accessoires, vous pouvez acheter des bonnettes et des tubes d'extension. Ce sont des loupes embarquées qui clipent sur votre lentille ou des bonnettes qui vont augmenter la longueur focale et il n'y a pas d'élément d'optique, fait que ça ne brise pas la qualité d'image. C'est un moyen de se rapprocher du sujet. La mise au point, pour faire la mise au point, vous pouvez vous rapprocher du sujet, donc un agrandissement de la photo. Mais ce qui arrive, c'est que quand on fait de la photo, la limite, c'est la lumière et le rapprochement. Et donc, ben, là, voilà une image macro. Ça, c'est Schizophyllum commune. Oui. Ah. Vous avez un myxomycète. Je n'ai pas réussi à identifier le genre encore. Il faut qu'on fasse la microscopie. Ce n'est pas un champignon, mais ça fait partie des espèces étudiées par les mycologues. Ça, c'est environ 2 mm de hauteur. Donc, l'éclairage, c'est le nerf de la guerre. Vous voyez, il faut un système d'éclairage pour éclairer les champignons. Il faut éviter les ondes d'ombre. Diffusion de la lumière. Donc, on met un filtre blanc par-dessus la lumière. La couleur de la lumière, c'est important, malgré qu'elle se corrige post-production, mais acheter des lumières qui contrôlent la température de la lumière. Flash ou lumière, ça dépend de votre style. C'est possible d'utiliser un flash avec une batterie au lithium, cependant, parce qu'il faut la même énergie à chaque lumière. Puis vous allez prendre plusieurs photos. En fait, vous allez voir les techniques avancées de photographie. On évite la lumière directement du soleil. Je vais vous donner un exemple. Ça, c'est une photo prise sans lumière. Vous n'êtes pas obligé, parce qu'ici, on va avoir la stature générale. La zone d'ombre est en dessous du chapeau. Moi, j'ai pris une autre photo en dessous du chapeau. Vous n'êtes pas obligé d'éclairer votre champignon. Ça dépend du contexte. Voici des lumières. Je passe rapidement là-dessus. Vous irez magasiner. Exemple de setup sur le terrain. Exemple de photo à ne pas prendre. Directement à la lumière du soleil. On ne voit pas grand-chose. On ne sait pas de quoi on s'adresse. Exemple de champignon éclairé en ce moment. On éclaire en dessous du chapeau. On voit les détails. Ça, c'est une photo scientifique. Ça, c'est une photo qui permet de voir les critères d'identification. Donc, le cadrage et le montage est important. Voici un exemple aussi de photo scientifique. Vous avez toutes les stades de maturité d'un champignon. Vous l'avez coupé en deux. On voit plusieurs items. Ça, pour ça, il faut une lentille 35 mm environ, ou du moins avoir un trépied puis se reculer. Présenter les spécimens de tous les âges. Nettoyage des spécimens, très important. Vous voulez enlever la terre. Vous utilisez un pinceau pour ce faire. Puis, on utilise, si vous n'avez pas en fait, de photo stacking, je vais y en parler brièvement. Ce sont les techniques avancées. C'est pour ça que nos photos sont très belles. On fait du photo stacking. Si vous n'avez pas de photo stacking, vous diminuez l'ouverture. C'est contre-intuitif, c'est une fraction, fait qu'on diminue l'ouverture pour avoir une meilleure profondeur de champ dans la photo. Mais qui dit diminution du diaphragme de la photo dit diminution de la lumière, donc il faut une vitesse d'obturateur basse, donc ça tremble, donc il faut un trépied. On n'a pas le choix pour faire de la photo macro de faire un trépied. Voici un petit trépied en carbone. D'ailleurs, vous viendrez voir mon kiosque, j'ai tout mon setup de photographie. Voici d'exemples de montage d'espèces dans lequel on voit tous les critères, on voit les stades, on voit les lames, le par-dessus chapeau, on voit la base du pied. Ce sont des photos de calibre scientifique. Voici un exemple à ne pas faire. Il n'y a aucun cadrage, la mise au point est dans le centre alors que le champignon est dans sa marge. La lumière est correcte, c'est peut-être une journée d'ombre, mais ce n'est pas une photo de calibre scientifique. Puis le post-traitement, le photo-stacking, en fait, j'en parle brièvement, mais c'est l'empilement de photos. C'est que vous prenez, par exemple, 200 photos sur le terrain et ensuite, vous les empilez dans un logiciel post-traitement qui permet de mettre tout au focus la profondeur de champ. Sinon, ça ne serait pas réalisable. Puis la manipulation des photos doit se faire. Il y a des aberrations, par exemple, sur le couvert végétal, il y a la lumière verte à cause que la lumière passe à travers les feuilles, ça donne ça. Mais on corrige les lumières. Je n'ai pas touché les couleurs du champignon. J'ai juste corrigé la lumière verte pour donner une photo comme celle-ci. Ça prend la manipulation de photo. C'est la base. De toute façon, dans la mesure que la photo traverse votre capteur, là, il y a une manipulation de photographie. Il y a une manipulation du logiciel qui se fait. Puis, je passe en rafale aussi, mais quand on prend de la photographie, c'est ultimement pour les documenter, les champignons. Donc, si on veut pousser au bout la démarche scientifique, on collecte sur le terrain les champignons pour les faire sécher, les étudier plus tard. Donc, on déterre ou on coupe des champignons. C'est la question souvent, on vous demande. Il y a des gens qui vont dire qu'il faut couper le champignon, des gens qu'il faut déterrer. En science, en fait, on devrait tout le temps déterrer le champignon, sauf quand vous cueillez des chanterelles, des morées et des bolets, parce que vous voulez juste enlever la saleté, vous savez ce que vous cueillez. Mais sur le terrain, vous déterrez le champignon, vous voulez avoir toutes les structures du champignon. Vous utilisez des sacs de transport qui sont non hermétiques parce que vous ne voulez pas que les champignons suent, en fait, qui transpirent dans le sac, qui vont se rendre, ils vont être tout simplement dégueulasses si vous les transportez à la maison. Qu'est-ce que vous notez? Les caractères que vous ne pouvez pas noter à la vue, que vous ne pouvez pas observer à vue d'œil, ce qui veut dire l'écologie. Une photo n'exprime pas l'écologie du terrain. L'odeur, la réaction de la chair, et ensuite, l'odeur, le goût. Vous goûtez les champignons, mais vous recrachez. À la maison, voici un exemple de fichier Excel, déshydrateur à basse température parce qu'il ne faut pas briser l'ADN, parce que ça va servir ça pour le séquençage génétique. Vous faites une sporée idéalement, vous classez tout ça à la maison. C'est important d'avoir un numéro unique. Les initiales, plus vous mettez 4 chiffres parce que si vous vous le rendez jusqu'à 1000 collections, il va falloir rentrer dans les 4 chiffres. Si vous êtes ambitieux, vous mettez 5 chiffres. Puis, vous mettez les initiales de votre prénom. C'est une manière de classer. Vous allez voir au début, là, vous avez la tête perdue. Ah, quelles données prendre, quelles données prendre. À la longue, vous allez vous dire les données essentielles. Juste les données essentielles. Déjà que c'est long faire ça, donnez-vous une chance. Puis ensuite, on publie sur les réseaux sociaux les bases de données. Donc, il y a les groupes Facebook. Publier sur des groupes Facebook, ils peuvent vous aider à identifier les champignons. Il y a des groupes plus spécialisés comme Asco France, Asco Mycete of the World, Fungi of the World, mais sinon, il y a le Cercle des mycologues de Québec, le Cercle des mycologues de Montréal et le groupe ICSQ, Identification des champignons. Le S, je ne me rappelle plus, et le Q, c'est pour le Québec. Quoi écrire? La date, le lieu, l'écologie, odeur et saveur, taille, sport et structure si vous avez fait la microscopie. Évidemment, des bonnes photos. Vous partagez vos données sur iNaturalist. Ça, c'est la base, au moins, sur iNaturalist. Si vous ne connaissez pas, je vous invite à visiter le site web. Je ne peux pas vous le présenter de long en large. Et sur Myco-Québec, c'est possible d'enrichir la base de données québécoise qui est Myco-Québec. Pour ce faire, c'est via Flickr, mais il y a un protocole. Puis ils vont vous mettre dehors si vous ne respectez pas le protocole. C'est du monde sérieux, il faut que ça soit une démarche sérieuse. Ensuite, le séquençage génétique, aux États-Unis, ça se fait et au Québec, ça se fait aussi. La FUNDIS, la Fungal Diversity Survey, qui est une entreprise américaine, un non-profit organization, qui fait des campagnes d'échantillonnage ouvertes au grand public. Vous pouvez envoyer 10 échantillons. En ce moment, vous avez le Fall Continental Blitz, Michael Blitz, dans lequel vous avez 10 jours en ce moment pour aller jusqu'au 27 octobre pour envoyer 10 champignons gratuits avec le séquençage. Vous avez Mike Cotta avec Stephen Russell, qui est l'un des personnes qui fait le plus de séquençage en Amérique du Nord, le Mushroom Ohio Lab. Et évidemment, il y a Myco-Québec. Mais Myco-Québec, c'est difficile de collaborer avec eux autres. C'est un cercle fermé, on les connaît, on travaille pour qu'ils rouvrent ça un peu. Puis Mycosphaera, c'est un projet en devenir. Nous aussi, on veut développer le séquençage génétique. Donc, par où commencer? Atelier d'identification des cercles d'hémicologues de votre région. Atelier de microscopie, s'il y en a ici. Je pense qu'à Montréal, il y en a aussi à Québec. Myco-Québec, c'est le site web à mettre dans votre poche. N'apportez pas de livre en forêt, c'est dépassé cette affaire-là. Là. C'est apporter Myco-Québec sur votre téléphone. Fédération québécoise des groupes de mycologie. Il y a une rencontre annuelle de tous les groupes de mycologie du Québec. C'est un beau moyen d'aller s'introduire. En plus, c'est un groupe social. Fait que vous buvez du bon vin, de la bonne bouffe. Puis c'est pendant 2-3 jours à un hôtel. La prochaine aura lieu à Gatineau, dans les belles forêts de feuillus. Un naturaliste, chez soi avec son propre fungarium. La meilleure moyen de commencer en mycologie, c'est de démarrer son propre fungarium. Puis un workshop de Mycosphaera, viendrait nous voir à notre kiosque. On fait des formations, on fait des conférences un peu partout sur le territoire du Québec. On est un petit peu moins à Montréal, mais on se développe. On a des gens qui se développent dans notre réseau à Montréal aussi. Fait que suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux. Merci.
Merci, Mathias.
Merci. Est-ce qu'il y a temps pour des questions ou on enchaîne avec l'autre conférencier?
On a probablement 2 minutes. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans la salle? Si je lève la main, je peux. Ou sur Zoom.
S'il n'y a pas de questions, je souhaite la bonne chance au prochain conférencier. Merci.
Oui. Merci, Mathias. We have some new friends joining us here in the space, I noticed. We also have some chairs up the front if you'd like to have a seat. We could probably find a couple more, but there's not a lot. But make yourself comfortable. We are going to get set up for our next presentation. Just getting.
All right, so just a reminder that when you're speaking, you're going to make
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is our second presentation day as part of Fungi Fest. I believe Susan Valyi we have for wild mushroom foraging. Am I correct with that? Amazing. Susan, over to you. Thanks for coming. I'm passing it over to you. You're ready to begin.
Sorry.
No problem.
All right, well, welcome. So this is about wild mushroom foraging. There's two of us. We're going to take turns to cover our material. And I'll start. My name is Susan Valyi. I'm not a mycologist. I am a wild mushroom hunter. And we take people out like pretty much every weekend. We both are certified mushroom guides. We studied here in Montreal at Nico Boutique. We can take people out and we can also sell to restaurants. I've been guiding for about 8 years and I got into mushrooms maybe 15 years ago. I was out with a friend. She was interested. I wasn't that interested at the beginning. But on one of our hikes, we came across these mushrooms that were like the size of loaves of bread. And we had to research and identify them. And in the process, I got hooked. So that's pretty much my story. And I will let Chantal introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Chantal d'Entremont, and I've been guiding with Susan for about 3 years now. And the way I got passionate about mushrooms was we fell upon some morel mushrooms one day in the forest, and it's just magical. When you start seeing mushrooms, all of a sudden they're everywhere. And I just happened to fall upon one of the best edible varieties there was. So how could I stop? So I went out for an outing with Susan about 6 years ago, and from there I was just really hooked. So I'm going to, that's it, really.
Leave it to me.
Leave it to Susan for the rest.
I'm going to talk about the popularity of mushrooms. In the last 10 years, I've seen the interest grow so much in terms of going out and hunting and eating mushrooms. People didn't think mushrooms were that healthy, and now they're discovering that they're full of nutrients and minerals, and they are really good for you. Some mushrooms, like chicken of the woods, we'll show you on our poster, is a great meat substitute. So a lot of people are interested in mushrooms for that reason also. And I also wanted to mention the discoveries being made in mycoremediation. They're discovering that like oyster mushrooms can eat up oil spills. Mushrooms can eat up plastic. And the last thing is that they are experimenting with growing mushrooms to make forms for packaging. So I find all that very interesting. You're next.
So we wanted to touch a little bit about how to identify mushrooms, how we learn to do it, and how we would encourage other people to do it as well. So we have in Quebec a lot of good resources, especially some books. So we've got a couple of our favorites here today. This is my Bible, basically, as far as mushroom hunting goes. It's a newer volume, and the pictures inside of it are amazing. So it's really important when you're looking for mushrooms that you're able to identify certain characteristics as far as the color, even the smell. Sometimes you want to taste it in the field. We're not going to go over everything today, but just to say that there's a lot of great reference books out there. There are some websites that can help, some apps, but it's really important to never trust just one resource. We always double check either with each other or another book. Even Facebook has some good identification groups. The Cercle des Mycologues de Montréal, they have a Facebook page as well. So even to this day, I'll put some pictures up when I'm not certain. So to identify mushrooms, even in the forest, you have to look at everything, including the terrain, what trees they might be associated with. Some grow on the ground, some grow on the trees. So that's how we learn to do it.
Okay, my favorite subject, the dangers of mushroom hunting. When we take people out, the first thing we do, we pretty much know what is out there at any time of the season that poses a danger. It is really a risky hobby. You have to be really careful. And I can show you, this will be at our table. You can come and look at this after. These are some of the very poisonous mushrooms. And in particular, I show people, this is the destroying angel. This is the most toxic mushroom. And this one is fatal. If you eat this, even a liver transplant won't bring you back. So we always look for these so that we can show people so they are aware of them right away before they get into mushroom hunting. There's more pictures, but this one I like to show people because this is a mushroom that looks very similar. This is how you can make a mistake. When people start mushroom hunting, they are the most dangerous when they're beginning and actually when they are experts, because they start to challenge themselves more in identifying more and more difficult species. So I'm just going to check my notes. Oh, sorry. I think that's about it. You have to be, with wild mushrooms, you always should sample a little bit because some people are really not mushroom tolerant. So you just take a little piece and fry it up and see how you do in a couple of hours, and then you'll know whether you can eat those mushrooms. And that's about it for the danger. All right. Now.
Has anybody heard of the mushroom film that came out last year, Fantastic Fungi? It's amazing. It's beautiful. So we wanted to touch a little bit about what a mushroom is in the forest. So Susan made us a beautiful drawing of a mushroom. And I'm not going to go over everything, but the important part was when you're in the forest, when you're learning, we encourage people to pick mushrooms. And some people wonder if it's okay to do that. Are we killing something that would otherwise have grown and spread its spores, have been food for animals? So perhaps animals will miss the one mushroom that I pick. But the mushrooms themselves are sort of like picking apples from a tree. You're not killing the organism. The mycelium that grows in the ground that supports the mushroom itself, that's really what keeps the mushroom growing year after year in the same areas. It could be underground, it could be in the trees, but that's really sort of like the tree part. So we do pick mushrooms when we go out. Our big focus is on edibles, and we absolutely ensure that at the end of any outing, we both take our time to go through every single basket, and we'll help identify mushrooms that might not be edible, but that are. I love mystery mushrooms. I pick them every time, and I bring them home at the end of our outings. And I'll sort of go through the reference books and try to identify them. So we encourage people to pick mushrooms, one of each variety if you don't really know what it is, and try to identify it. But I think that's what I wanted to say on that point.
I'm gonna have to, oops. I'm gonna have to hold this. I didn't think of propping it up. I designed this poster years ago. I took all the photographs and all the text. It's translated. You need a microscope to read it, but all the info is there. And the idea of this was to show local common edibles. And this is what's available to us. And it's also the whole season. We're finished now. We stopped guiding 2 weeks ago because we saw the last of the fall mushrooms. So if anyone is interested, I have these posters at our table. And I think that's all I wanted to say about the posters.
So as we mentioned, we really focus on being able to go in the forest and pick edible mushrooms. So one of the fun parts, naturally, is being able to cook them and eat them. And what we find with wild mushrooms is that there's so many variety with different flavors and different ways to cook them. So my favorite way to cook a new mushroom would be to generally slice it, fry it in a little bit of butter and oil, and it really helps the mushroom release some of the water. A mushroom is about 90% water, and then you just keep frying it, and then you get to eat it. So what we would suggest for new varieties, something that you've never eaten, is that you try small portions at first. Some people do have reactions. It could be allergy, it could be gut issues, just like you would to any new variety. So use a small portion, cook it alone, and we would even say maybe keep one sample of what you've eaten aside, just in case. Take good pictures of it. You shouldn't need to do that, but it would be good practice. So I also wanted to touch on what can you do if you do find a large bunch of mushrooms? So how to preserve them. You'll see over here, someone has morels that they've dried. That's a very common way of drying certain mushrooms. So drying, dehydrating are perfect for some mushrooms. Some prefer to pickle. You can pickle certain mushrooms. I'm not going to go into all of the varieties and how it's best. For example, chanterelles, they're delicious, but they become quite hard if you dehydrate them. So we sort of recommend to cook them and then freeze them, but they're also one that will be fun to pickle. Some of the wild varieties, you can't buy them in general stores. There's places like Jean Talon, you might be able to find them, or at La Myco boutique, but there's wonderful mushrooms. You'll see them on Susan's poster. the lobster mushrooms. It's something quite unique in terms of flavor. You really taste the seafood aspect of it and then the color of the lobster. So it's something really special to be able to cook a food that you found, you foraged yourself. It's just wonderful in terms of flavor that you can add to a dish. Much different than the button mushrooms that you would have from the grocery store. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just a different experience. So once you get your mushrooms at home, what do you do with them? We have to make sure that what we pick in the forest is still consumable in the sense that, like any produce, you don't want your mushrooms to be in the bottom of your basket full of dirt, smushy and slimy. That's not a good culinary experience. So we recommend you put your mushrooms clean in your basket. So they make these beautiful little knives with a brush on it that you bring in the forest with you. Put your mushrooms in your basket as clean as you can. But once you're home, you'll be looking at them. Again, you want your mushrooms to be sort of good texture, firm, nothing slimy. Just make sure that they're fresh. And you can clean them at home, again, with a brush to try and get some dirt out. Some people will prefer to put them in water and really give them a good wash. But some of the mushrooms at that point take on a lot of water. So cook your mushrooms really well. Some of them take a long time to cook and to have sort of not just the texture, but for example, morels, if they're not well cooked, they could give you a toxic reaction. So again, in this presentation, we can't go over all of the mushrooms and all of the things, but it's very important to know what you're doing, not just picking your mushroom, but also the cooking and the eating of them.
Okay, I'm just going to finish up with our experiences guiding. It's something that we really love doing, and it's amazing the people that come on board, the people that we meet. For example, we have this photographer who comes out with us quite often, and he doesn't pick mushrooms. He pays, but he spends the whole time lying on the ground, taking pictures. He's got a special hood and he takes the most amazing photographs of mushrooms. And we just say, don't bother with him. He likes lying around. So that's kind of fun. We take out usually 10 to 12 people. We charge $30 per person. We don't like to take out a big group because it's really hard to pay attention to a lot of people. And we want it to be a good experience for everybody. I've taken out a few really small private groups this year. That's been really interesting. I took out a group of octogenarian retired filmmakers, and they were so enthusiastic. It was so much fun to take that group. And generally, we're having a lot of people come back. We have a few regulars, always new people. So there have been some changes. We had a really favorite spot near Le Shutte that was known for matsutake, which is a very desirable mushroom. And one year we went there, and at the same time that we parked, a bus showed up full of mushroom hunters. And that was the end of that. There was no going back to that spot, and they posted it not long after, no mushroom picking. We're seeing that more and more on the island of Montreal. I think all the parks are now closed to mushroom hunters, which I don't entirely understand, and it's unfortunate. So that's it for us. We have a little video that a friend from the Saint Anne de Bellevue market did for us. It's really a wonderful thing to have. And I just have to check the time.
Yeah, 11:54.
Oh, okay. We have a little 3-minute video. And our table is right here if you want to come and visit. I have posters. You can sign up if you want to come mushroom hunting with us next year. And I forgot my business cards. Oh, well, okay, that's it. Thank you.
We do have that video.
Did you ever wonder about mushrooms? And how many interesting edible mushrooms are out there in the wilds of Quebec and Eastern Ontario? Meet Susan Valyi and her collaborator, Chantal. They'll guide you on a mushroom foraging adventure you won't soon forget.
I've been doing this for years, and together we've been doing this for a couple of years. So I'm going to show you my poster. This I designed years ago, and it's a guide to the most recognizable and edible mushrooms. There's no poisonous mushrooms on this poster. That's something that I will show you. So what's really important is to show you what are the poisonous mushrooms that are out there. You'll see, I think a lot of these still stand. They're probably still out. These are Amanita muscaria. Don't pick those. This is the Amanita, I think this is virosa. And it is the most poisonous mushroom. It's fatal. There's no recovery from this mushroom. Some mushrooms will make you sick, but this one will kill you. So we'll probably see them and we'll show them to you. And the important way to recognize them is they grow out of an egg. In here. We should find hedgehogs. I'm really hoping that we find trumpets because these are really exceptional mushrooms. And as the lobsters are over, we could get lucky. We could find a king gully or chicken of the woods. And this one also I'm looking for. It's a saffron milky cap. And when we see them, we'll show everybody so that you see an actual example. And when you pick mushrooms, I don't have one on me, but the way to do it is cut them at the base or pull them out and just trim off the dirt. The idea being that you put clean mushrooms in your basket. Because if they're dirty, you'll be so sorry in the kitchen. It's really hard to clean them if they get dirty. Okay, so we're done. Let's go. Let's get out there.
Yeah, I went to Susan's mushroom picking once before. I really enjoyed it, but I feel like I need the expert so that I make sure I get the right things. So we'll see what we find today.
They're meant to be something. I'm not edible. Ruscula mushrooms.
Thank you both. Thank you for the presentation. We're going to take a break. Our next presentation will be at 1 o'clock with Nico Shutte. I'm getting, sorry, well, unless Chad is here, because we were looking for Chad, and I don't think Chad has made it in yet. We'll see if we can add Chad in a little bit later. I don't know if that's possible, but the rest of you that are here, the market is open in the front of the space. I believe skin jacking has arrived. There's the Concordia Food Coalition. We have some other things happening, and our next presentation is at 1 o'clock. Thanks, everyone. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to Concordia University's Forest Space. Thank you for joining us for the, I don't know if it's the second half, the next part, let's say, in today's event, Fungi Fest Montreal. It's the second edition of Fungi Fest, but it's again the first time we've ever had it here at Forest Space. Just to let you know, we are streaming to YouTube Live from Forest Space, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. We work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge with activities that examine research questions, projects, community projects, things in development all across the university. We're running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting. So there are some people joining us by Zoom. If you have comments or questions, pop them into the chat. I don't know, we'll try and get those to the speakers, etc. And same for anyone here in the space. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone over to you just so that people online can hear as well. Okay, that's enough for me. It's now my pleasure to pass it over to Nico Shutte. Nico, it's great to have you back.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for having me back. Thank you to Michelle, the organizer of Fungi Fest. Very happy and pleased to be here for a second year. And I'm going to tell you about Co-op Cultivation. Woo! Thank you, thank you. So if you don't already know, Co-op Cultivation is the Loyola campus community farm. We are the largest open air farm of the Loyola Garden Groups, located in NDG, and we do a lot of different things. For example, someone does microgreens, someone does mushrooms, that's me. Someone does community outreach. So it's a group of about 6 people that all have their special interests. And yeah, we kind of make the perfect team. We complement one another, and we sell our produce right outside of Fourth Space here every Wednesday from 3 to 5 at the Pay What You Can market. So yeah, what the heck is a co-op? So our co-op is made of 2 different types of members, that is worker members and user members. So user members are people who pay a one-time $10 fee, and the whole market becomes pay what you can for the rest of your life. Oh my gosh. And then if you are an ASFA student, then we will be receiving student fee levy money from you this semester. So that means that you are automatically a member. So yeah, we have volunteer hours on Tuesdays from 10 to 2, every second Saturday from 10 to 2. We also have a farm in Centerville now. So it's a larger plot, and this is more like production focused. And yeah, where does the food go? It goes to the stands right outside of these walls. And we also have open fridges. So on the 7th floor, there's a community fridge, and we stock it every Wednesday at the end of the markets, and it's free for anyone to take. Also, right across the street of Frigo Vert, they have an open fridge that we also give our produce to. So about half the produce is going to markets and the open fridges. The other half is going to mutual aid community kitchens, such as Community Cooks Collective, the People's Potato, Open Door, Resilience, Montreal, O3, Women on the Rise, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, we do the markets to be able to afford to give away the food for free to mutual aid kitchens so that meals can be had. So yeah, that's a little bit about Co-op Cultivation. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about mushrooms and how cool they are and what the program does. So originally we were an indoor grow facility, and now we are an outdoor grow facility. So that means that we are growing outdoor varieties of different mushrooms in wood chips and straw and logs as well. They're all perennial mushroom yields, and I do a lot of courses. I do an annual mushroom cultivation course. It is a 20-hour, 4-day intensive, everything about mushroom cultivation from indoors and outdoors, and then a lot of foraging walks as well. So I'm in the lab and I'm in the woods, and I love that people are interested in that these days, so that whichever of the 2 that they're interested in, I'm happy to get that journey started for people. There's going to be a foraging walk November 2nd from 12 to 2 at the Morgan Arboretum, one of my favorite places to get mushrooms. And that is done by the Mycological Society if you're interested. And yeah, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of mushrooms and how mushrooms can kind of change the way that we think about ourselves and the world and those around us. Common question I get at the farm is, oh, what got you into mushrooms? So I'm going to tell you now. I love life. I was first a houseplant enthusiast in like 2019, 2020. And I was like, wait a minute, I could be growing food. Oh my gosh. So now I'm growing food. And then I'm getting into kombucha, like different things that are cultures or that have starters like sourdough and things like that. So any fermentation or anything you need to take care of, I am really into. And then I found out that mushrooms are the same So in order to grow mushrooms from scratch, you order a liquid culture syringe, and that is called a mushroom culture. You feed it honey or some kind of sugar, and then it grows. Then you transfer it to grain, transfer it to wood, and then yeah, that's its final substrate, and then it grows. So the whole like process is very fascinating to me, and I'm sure plenty of mycophiles here as well. And yeah, so pause on that. Whenever you think of an apple tree, has its big trunk, has its root systems, has its branches and its leaves and its apple. In the mushroom world, the mushroom is only the apple. So that means that the leaves, the branches, the trunk, the roots, everything else is the mycelium body that's underground. And it's only because of this mycelium body that trees and plants are able to communicate to each other in the woods. So yeah, if we like looked at the forest floor, I encourage you to like dig around. You'll find some white mycelium, stick your nose in it, best smell in the world. So it's like a spongy substance that lines all the forests, and the mycelium acts as a sponge that has nutrients and water, and it can send signals between different trees. For example, if there's like a lot of maple trees that are having a fungus, they say, hey, we're having a fungus to the other maple trees. And the mycelium will tell, yeah, other mycelium in its network to say, hey, we need to put some more hyphae strands to this area to try and keep disease from spreading to the rest of the trees. So mushrooms is very important to the ecosystem, of course, and for people who are interested in permaculture, talks about the 7 layers of the forest. There's also like a ground zero layer, the mushrooms, that really help to everything to work together to be able to share its resources evenly. And yeah, so the mycelium also grows radially, which is interesting because not a whole lot of things in the world grow radially. And the mushroom doesn't have a brain, but it knows what's good for the whole. So it's kind of like an ant situation. Like, do individuals exist as ants if all of their behaviors are going to be used for the benefit of the whole colony? Kind of like the mushrooms and the mycelium. So yeah, mushrooms hold a lot of wisdom, a lot of stories, a lot of history, and yeah, it's just really fun to dive into that and generally be growing them and taking care of the cultures. So yeah, that's kind of the deal with why I started to grow mushrooms. And then also because they're delicious and an awesome meat substitute. They have a lot of medicinal value as well. Like for example, lion's mane mushroom is very good for your brain, memory. Reishi mushroom is very good for your immune system. Yeah, and they've been used by a lot of different cultures all throughout time for different purposes. And I'm just really happy that at Co-op Cultive Action, I am able to do that and spend my time being with mushrooms all the time and growing them and taking care of them and learning their own like personalities in a way. Like, for example, all the mycelium is white except for shiitake gets brown and chicken of the woods gets orange. So it's like interesting. The more time that you spend with these creatures, basically, the more that you get to know about all of their ins and outs. So that's like my whole job. And then people come and they say, what's up with mushrooms? And I talk their ear off and I'm like, I'm so happy that you asked. I would love to tell you all about it. So if you're ever interested in learning, you're always welcome at the co-op. It's in NDG at 7075 Rue Terrebonne. And yeah, we have a lot of volunteers come in, do your own projects, or just learn. If you have like an assignment where you need to go to a nonprofit, people love to come to the farm. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be able to be a part of people's like foraging and growing journeys. And yeah, I think that's kind of it. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the space. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Nico. I don't know if there's any questions from the, oh, I see a hand. That's great. We'll bring a microphone over to you. Also online, if anyone has any questions there, you can just pop them into the chat. We'll read them out.
Hello, and thank you for a great presentation. I heard today that in Montreal, they have banned mushroom foraging in all the parks. Do you know if there's any parks that are available, like that people can get to with public transportation, where you still can?
Yeah, very good question. I didn't get the memo about it not being allowed, and I would love to know under whose jurisdiction and whose regulation is saying that on lands that are unceded and are in dispute. So good question. And whenever people ask me that, I don't mind. And like on foraging tours, people will say, oh, but what if someone stops me? And I say, you put on a big smile and you talk about how excited you are to be foraging, and you tell them what you're foraging for, and you tell them what you're going to use it for. And 9 times out of 10, the people are going to leave you alone and not escalate the situation. And yeah, what's with all the borders, like the waterways, the airways, the forests? Like, is there ever going to be an area that's not going to be policed? And I don't respect the jurisdictions that are trying to say that. And also, Montreal has an anti-pesticide ban, which is another woo. So that means that unless someone is like going out with their Roundup to Mont Royal and spraying it down, there's no pesticides, which is awesome because then you can forage clean and you don't need to be worried about, because pesticides is the biggest thing. So all you need to be worried about is like car pollution and dog urine, and hasn't hurt me yet. And wash your things really well, of course. So yeah, good point. Ultimately, it's up to you if you want to respect that law or not. And if anyone tries to stop you, I think they're not the law probably, so you can have a conversation with them. And if they really say no, then just leave and go to the next part or stop entirely. Good question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, we got one.
Hi. Hello. So you talked about starting a mushroom colony from the culture in the syringe, and
Correct.
then using that to inoculate a batch of grain. Can you also start a batch from the spent grain from a previous batch?
Sorry, you're asking using the culture and putting it on the grain, and then?
And then once you use that to grow mushroom on wood chip, for example.
Correct.
Can you use part of a previous, part of a previous mycelium batch to grow a new batch in wood chip?
Okay. How I'm understanding the question is that you have cultivated your grain spawn, and then you have used pieces of it to be put into a grow bag. And then you're like, great, I just used 10 grow bags and I used a 32-ounce mason jar of grain. Now I have all this grain left over. What do I do? Is that kind of the question?
Actually, so my question is, once you've grown mushroom out of your grow bag,
Yes.
right? And the material is spent.
Correct.
Can you take part of that spent material to then inoculate new batches of wood chips?
Yes, I'm understanding now. So you are saying that you have a grow bag that has given you all of its mushrooms. So now it is a spent grow bag. That's my mistake. I was understanding grain spawn. So yeah, whenever it's done, bury it somewhere, whether you have a yard or go on public property that Sheena says that we can't forage anymore, and then you can cultivate. So you're not foraging, you're cultivating, right? So you can take that spent block and bury it somewhere and then cover it with leaf litter, any compost that you have, and certainly at least 4 inches of wood chips or straw. Yeah, that's what we would do with our grow bags. Like, we grow them, that'd be awesome, a lot of fun. It gives about 5 pounds of oyster mushrooms, and then we throw it in the farm, and then we just cover it with straw. And best case scenario, get mushrooms, and worst case scenario, we are adding to the soil health of the farm, and we are saving on water in more ways than not just monetarily. And we're better able to connect all of the root systems, the pathways, and the nutrients underneath. And also, I didn't say this earlier, but because of having mushrooms in the ground, we're also nourishing like hundreds of thousands of microorganisms and bacteria and bugs and worms and all that fun, gross stuff. So yeah, best case scenario, you get mushrooms. Worst case scenario, you're building great soil health. So I encourage anyone to have a spent bag, like go to La Fontaine or something and like bury it in a hole and cover it back up, and check on it next year and see what happened. And if nothing, you can still like feel good that you had still contributed to the ecosystem in a positive way. It's a good question. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, yes.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. You spoke a little bit about learning from mushrooms and how they work. And yeah, I'm just curious if you have thoughts to share about if there's a politics to learn from mushrooms, and I guess as a kind of separate part to the question, but yeah, in terms of organizing around mushrooms, how far you think we are, or what steps would have to be taken in order to have a kind of like grassroots cultivation of mushrooms that can like really materially contribute to the food systems here in Montreal.
Okay, so the two-part. The first one is what are we learning about mushrooms, and the second one is how can we like honor that knowledge to be able to build a better, more resilient food system.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Okay, so what have I learned about mushrooms? Yeah, there's something really beautiful. Like I was saying, how they grow radially. There's no like obstruction to them. Like for us, there are walls and there are waterways, and whether man-made or not man-made, there are things that like keep our beings in some kind of line. And the mushrooms, they don't have any of those rules, which is really awesome. There's no like binaries at all within mushrooms. And also the janitors of the world. So if we didn't have mushrooms, we'd be living in our own waste and wouldn't even be here. So yeah, and the way that really the most important thing to me is about how they're sharing resources in between all other types of organisms, whereas like we could share resources with all different types of people. And that, yeah, everyone is important, and that, yeah, I think that's really the base of what I'm trying to say is just like how, I don't know, it's like, it's really loving the way that mushrooms live and exist with one another, and like one log can have multiple different types of mycelium in it. So like, it's cool to say, oh my gosh, this log has chicken of the woods. This is awesome. I harvest that. I look on the other side. No way, there's lion's mane too. Like, the impossible has become possible. So it just really like breaks down a lot of like boundaries and borders and things like that. And then how to make the food system more resilient based on how mushrooms are doing their thing. Great. So first of all, international factory farming, done, out, canceled. I think that all food systems should be localized, and that we should be eating different foods that are being grown in our area and having to import as little as possible, not only for the climate part of importation, but also like the labor exploitation and slavery and a lot of violence that has come from the international factory food system. And yeah, having a lot more smaller farms, kind of like ourselves, and plenty of other farmers, especially in Ontario and Quebec. I would like to see that network be stronger. And generally, I understand that everyone needs to make money, but there's surplus in all industries. So being able to offer that back to the community is only going to better like your organization, your community, the health of the people around you. Like there's no losing, except for like financial incentives and bottom lining and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I think just being more boundaryless with the things that you want to do within reason, and having small networks of food providers, and less so of just relying on monopolies and like the grocery stores. Like half the reason we have this pay what you can stand right outside of these doors is in response to Loblaws and like increasing the grocery amount to an insane level. And I mean, not to toot our own horn, but like growing food and giving it away, and you know, finding other people that have similar values, like the People's Potato, like Frigo Vert, like Community Cooks, like Resilience, Open Door, O3, Women on the Rise, like taking that excess or being able to produce excess so that you know that you can be able to provide for different communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to this nutrient dense produce. Because for example, a head of lettuce, if you cut it in California and it gets shipped here, within 72 hours, it's lost 80% of its nutrients. And the government says, well, be healthy and eat your salads. And it's like, that would be great, you know, if the food system that you have forced us to abide by actually gave us some nutrients, but that's not what they're in it for. So I think having farming practices and different organizations value those types of, yeah, valuing things like that, and less so of, you know, money, shareholders, blah, 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 bigger, bigger, bigger. Like, I think those are some lessons that could be learned from mushrooms. And generally, mushrooms are the janitors. Like, what are you going to do with your waste whenever it's done? Like the spent grow bag, whenever you're done, what, you going to throw it away? Are you crazy? Let it ferment and create more greenhouse gases? No, put it in the ground. That's where it belongs. Or people who just like throw away their compost generally. Like some farming practices don't have internal composting because that requires a lot of labor. That requires a lot more money. Yeah, but isn't it worth it at the end? So just kind of thinking more like cyclical and more long, thinking further down the future and not just what's going to get you through this season or the next season and so on and so forth. I hope that answers your question.
No, thank you. That's great.
Okay, cool.
Do we have any other questions? Anyone online? You can pop in. It's not too late. Okay. That might be it for our questions, Nico. But you're going to be sticking around. Maybe people could come and ask you a couple things after, maybe.
Certainly. And I will be right here from 3 to 5, right outside these doors. Come say hi, come have a chat. I would love to know, what do you love about mushrooms? And yeah, I'd love to meet you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Coming up next, we're holding up for Big Bloc Champignons. Apparently they are in traffic. Maybe they're in the forest foraging. I don't know. They're on their way. In the meantime, just before that, from our presenter that we had on our schedule earlier this morning, Chad Carrière from the Révolution des Fungi has sent us a video. So we're going to show that video. I'm not sure exactly how long it is, maybe 5 minutes, let's say. And we're going to just let that roll. And then hopefully Big Bloc Champignon will make it in. Okay, thank you.
Le premier organisme qui a pu sortir de la vie océanique pour aller sur la Terre, en fait, il n'y en a aucun. Il n'y a aucun organisme seul qui était capable de faire ça. Donc, la vie terrestre a commencé avec une association gagnant-gagnant, avec une symbiose. Bonjour, je suis biologiste. J'ai un doctorat en sciences forestières, spécialisé dans les champignons souterrains. Peu importe la raison pourquoi on commence la mythologie, que ce soit pour manger des champignons ou pour les étudier, c'est tout autant valable.
La révolution des fonges est une micro-série documentaire qui explore des innovations et des solutions apportées par les champignons. Mon but, en fait, est d'utiliser mes compétences en vidéo, puis ma passion pour la mycologie, pour vous faire découvrir des aspects encore peu connus des champignons ou approfondir les connaissances que certains d'entre vous pourraient déjà avoir avec l'aide de scientifiques du Québec. Comme vous le savez, les champignons jouent un rôle crucial dans notre écosystème. La symbiose entre la nature et l'humain est essentielle à notre survie et les champignons offrent des solutions à de nombreux problèmes actuels. Beaucoup savent que certains champignons sont comestibles ou mortels, mais peu connaissent leurs propriétés médicinales, leur capacité à décontaminer notre environnement et leur potentiel dans la création de matériaux durables et biodégradables. Je suis sûr que plusieurs d'entre vous vont découvrir une nouvelle passion pour ce monde complexe et vraiment fascinant. Merci pour votre intérêt et votre soutien et à bientôt.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. Gabrielle has made it in from Big Bloc Champignons is here now in the space. Who's going to give us a little introduction to what they are working on right now. Gabrielle, thank you for coming in. Welcome to Fungi Fest on Fourth Space, Concordia. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Valyi. I'm a co-owner of Atelier Champignons Big Bloc. We're an urban mushroom farm. We started 7 years ago, but we've been in our new spaces in Montreal for the past 5 years. We mainly do commercial cultivation of mushrooms for restaurants, markets, distribution, but we also have a whole aspect that's devoted to education within the urban agricultural space. Within that context, we're part of a co-op called La Centrale Agricole. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard about it. It's a co-op of independent companies, but it's a solidarity co-op that was set up to help incubation of urban agricultural projects. We started out 5 members. We were part of the first 5 members. And slowly the project took expansion with all kinds of investments from the city and from provincial government as well. And now we have nearly 20 members within the co-op. And we've become one of the largest co-ops of its kind in North America, possibly the largest. That's still contentious. We'll see when more information comes in. And as members of the co-op, we try to diversify the project as much as possible. So there's a big aspect put on, as we're doing here, education within the space, but also put on circularity. So since a lot of different companies are producing different materials and using different materials, there's a big incentive for us to try to put those in circulation within the company. For instance, as mushroom growers, we can use a lot of agricultural byproducts to grow the mushrooms that we grow. So Co-op Boomerang, which is one of our colleagues, they actually take the residues from beer brewing, dry them out, and it creates like a malted flour that we can use. They make all kinds of products with it, cookies and so on, but we can also use it to grow mushrooms. Then we send our stuff to the composter. The compost is then sent to the city. It's used to enrich flower beds and different things like that. And us as growers, so we try to integrate within that space as much as possible. Internally, what we do, well, we grow 6 to 10 different varieties of edible mushrooms per year, year round, I mean. And we do that, yes, with different agricultural byproducts. And we also have the education aspect. So what we do is, in addition to promoting it to the public like this, we also work with the city. We work with community centers, schools, public gardens, and so on. So year round, we tend to break it up into 2 parts. We have the growing at home, growing in the garden aspect just during the summer. And then during the winter, we give classes on how to prepare mushrooms, how to preserve them, and even how to create them at home, kind of like what we would do, but on a smaller scale with the type of equipment that people might have at home. It's a bit simpler than you might have. Has anybody here ever tried growing mushrooms? Yes, sir. May I ask what type of mushrooms you grew or what methods you used?
Just simple grow bags, oyster mushrooms, shiitake, lion's mane.
Did you prepare your own bags?
No.
No, okay.
Next step.
How was the results?
Pretty good. Everything's worked except my latest try with oyster mushrooms, and I had insufficient airflow, I think.
Okay.
And they kind of gave up after a few days.
Yeah, it can be a bit tricky sometimes, but on average, results can be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
There was a question here. You do. Is it on a commercial scale or is it at home? At home. What type of mushrooms do you grow?
Just lion's mane right now.
Okay.
I bought a grow bag, and then I took a tissue culture of it and put it on agar plate.
Interesting.
And
did you have access to a lab to be able to do
no,
it?
I just bought my own equipment, like a still air box, and
Very
I like
nice.
heat sterilize my stuff.
Okay. And have you had interesting results?
Right now I'm at colonizing the grain spawn with popcorn tech.
Okay.
So I'm waiting for that.
Very cool.
That's it.
Very, very interesting.
Thank you.
One last question. I'm asking the questions instead of vice versa, but it's always part of the thing. Where did you acquire your blocks and tissue sample? The tissue sample came from the mushrooms that you grew, basically. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Very
I
interesting.
bought the block online. I forgot the champi, the petit champi. What's the company?
Champignons Maison, perhaps?
No.
No? Okay. There's been a lot of farms that have been popping up actually. So it's a live, well, obviously we're all here, so it's a pretty lively space with a lot of interest towards it.
Well, I did buy a block from Nico boutique.
Oh,
Lion's mane.
I used to work at Myco boutique
cool.
actually. Yeah, I've been within the space for a while. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as we see, well, it's a small sample size out of everybody that's here, but there is a lot of people who are starting to do it at home. And so we promote that. And we also work with schools. I've worked with several high schools that had like small agricultural programs to help the kids integrate things into the garden and learn a bit more about it. And we also do consultation. So we've helped other farms set up, try to design their grow room, design their spaces and so on. And we're currently working with another a large high school on the South Shore that's setting up an agricultural roof on top of the school. So they're going to have a whole mushroom thing, place for like peppers and tomatoes and so on. And we're pretty excited about sharing that with everyone. And finally, we do a bit of transformation because the culinary aspect of the company is very important to us too. I come from that world. I worked in restaurants for 15 years. I've worked as a cook, as a chef, as a manager, and so on. It's a very exhausting type of environment, hence no more hair. And but we had that connection to the food. And when we discovered that we could grow the mushrooms and grow finer products than what are normally found, that's how we went into it. So we also transformed some mushrooms. We do some canning, some pickled mushrooms. We have some spice mixes as well that we create that is kind of like a curry powder, but made with wild mushrooms that are very aromatic and all kinds of different things. So we also like to educate people on the culinary aspects because it is a bit less known. So people don't know what to do with them and so on. So our education tries to spread out over the whole aspect. We're going to be setting up a kiosk as well. So if you're interested to come see our products and ask more in-depth questions about the culinary aspects of it, we're going to have some really nice things to show. Wild chanterelle, stuff that we've grown ourselves, and all of those delicious spices and dried mushrooms. Does anybody have any questions about the company, how it was built, our methods of production?
I think we have a question over here. And also, I'll just mention before, as I did before, anyone online, if you have a question, pop it into the chat and I'll read it out.
Not exactly what you were asking for, but the workshops that you offer, are they French only or are they available in English or?
We can adapt. Today, I was planning on giving it in French. I switched over to English last minute, and that's totally fine. It depends on the who's participating. So basically, when we've been doing workshops in part of the cities that was more predominantly Anglophone, we do it in English. But I also try to answer all questions in the language that I can answer, either French or English. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Oh, we got one
here.
Hi, I didn't catch the name of your company and where you guys are.
Oh, okay. We're Atelier Champignons Big Bloc, or a Big Bloc Mushroom Workshop. We're situated at 1401 Rue Legendre Ouest. That's where the cooperative is, basically. So it's near Marché Central. It's on Boulevard L'Acadie. It's more north of the city. Yeah, it's a large industrial building that originally was for textiles. And slowly but surely, it's been converted into an agricultural space. We occupy about 2/3 of the building now. Well, not just our business, but with our partners and people in the co-op. Exactly.
Thank you.
Question here.
Yep.
Since it's like urban, does that mean that you can like grow it all year round? Because like it's like urban, so.
Absolutely, yes. We can grow on it around. There's a lot of details to take into account, of course, a bit of climate control, but that's what actually lets us do it. So most mushrooms are going to fruit, well, edible mushrooms are going to fruit between the ideal ranges, maybe 15 to 23 degrees, depending on the species and the strain. So we just find a middle ground, basically. We grow at around 18 degrees in our room. Just a simple air filtration system that's climatisé, climatized, and pass through the humidification and so on. So what we do is we produce everything in-house. We have our production center with our sterilization machines, a small lab to be able to do the work that your friend here was doing as well. I'm assuming you're friends. No, okay. And then we have an incubation space. And that's it. So yes, year round we can do it. Actually, the cycle is very fast. From inoculation, which is adding the spawn to the substrate on which a mushroom grows, to fruiting the mushrooms and harvesting them, it's about 3 to 4 weeks total. 2 weeks of incubation from inoculation, then it's into the grow room, and oftentimes we're going to get the first flush of mushrooms within 7 to 10 days. So it's a constant thing. It is very labor intensive. And those blocks, eventually the mushroom consumes most of the nutrients that are available in them. And therefore, we always have to put them out, send them to the compost, put new ones in. So it's high intensity, it's year round, but there's also a bit of space to reduce or augment the quantity produced since the cycle is so short. So it's pretty easy to address those issues.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seems pretty silent.
I think that was our last question.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for waiting too. Traffic was crazy. My bad. I'd invite you to come see us if you want to have more one-on-one or more information or just see what we have to offer.
Gabriel, thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you everyone else for being here, let's say. Stick around until 2 o'clock. We'll have Melany Kahn. Look forward to that. And there's all sorts of things happening, so I welcome you to walk around, check out the rest of Fungi Fest. Having so much fun here. Okay. See you at 2.
Sure. Hi. Welcome in.
I love all the mushroom games.
Yeah, welcome
Oh,
in.
are you?
Yeah, we're about to start.
Oh, geez. Okay, yeah. Let me go to bed.
Is there a link that you would like for me to You have an hour, so. Okay, can I open it up? Absolutely. Just give us a little heads up so we can, well, just say, we're gonna, we're gonna run Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I definitely love to have it be interactive.
We'll just give you that heads up. We'll run a microphone to them. Okay. We're good to go. Yeah, so we'll do our introduction. We'll toss it to you. Take it away, however you so please, and signal us. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Concordia University's Forest Space. Thank you for joining us for today's special talk as part of Fungi Fest Montreal. Title is Never Too Young or Too Old to Start Foraging with Melany Kahn. Now, just to let you know, we're streaming to YouTube. We're live from Forest Space. We're located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. We're also running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting. So people joining us there, don't forget, you can pop questions, comments there in the chat. We'll read them out to Melany at the end. But just before we begin, I'd like to just give a little background, a little bio for Melany. Just so we know, my glass is on for that one. Melany Kahn is a second-generation mushroom hunter who learned to forage from her parents, the late abstract painter Emily Mason and the late landscape painter Wolf Kahn. Melany was a professor of film production at NYU before returning to New Hampshire and Vermont. She's been a Vermont volunteer, guardian ad litem, court-appointed advocate for children, and was a court-appointed family mediator for many years. And she is a board member on the Emily Mason and Alice Trumbull Mason Foundation, served on the board of the Hilltop Montessori School in Brattleboro, Vermont. And since 2002, she has led school children, mushroom clubs, nature center groups on woodland walks to gather and identify edible mushrooms. Melany teaches the culinary aspects of fungi through recipes, cooking demonstrations, tastings, and I believe also books. Anyway, from that, I'm just happy to pass it over to Melany. Melany, welcome in. Welcome to Forest Space. Welcome to Fungi Fest.
Thank you so much. Okay. I guess I definitely need to be on the mic, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, hello. I am Melany Kahn, and my passion is looking for wild, edible mushrooms with children. So it's probably good to start with a little disclaimer. And it's not the one about being mushrooms being poisonous, right? Because you've all heard that a million times, right? What do we hear about mushrooms when we look at them when we're children? Don't what? Don't touch that, right? And so what don't touch that really means is don't learn about that, right? Because you can't really learn about anything that you may not touch. So mushroom education has been completely denied to you for your entire lives based on mycophobia, right? Because it's not actually a thing. You actually can touch mushrooms. You can even touch wild poisonous mushrooms. You just can't eat mushrooms that you don't know what they are. You touch things all day long that you don't eat. 99.9% of the things that you interact with, you touch and you don't eat, right? So, no, my disclaimer is different than that. It's that mushroom foragers, like myself, are slightly kooky about our passion. And that kookiness shows up at things like these events where you have a whole bunch of us talking about and extolling the incredible virtues of mushrooms, right? And the fact that you all are here means that you're at least slightly interested in this world of fungi and what it's all about, right? So I like to provide a lot of access points for everybody from kids to college kids to grandparents about where do you begin understanding anything about the incredible world of fungi. And we all have an origin story. And maybe for some of you, today is your origin story. You walked in the door and you got a little interested. You're like, wow, what is this thing with all these kooky mushroom foragers and growers and cultivators and psilocybin advocates and mushroom aficionados? So maybe today's your origin story. But for me, my origin story is that I am a second generation mushroom forager. So what this means is that my parents taught me how to forage. And when I go around the country, in the US, I'm from Vermont. When I go around the country, I find so many people say to me, my grandmother taught me how to look for morels in Michigan, or I have a great uncle in California and he knows every bolete out there and I love going out with him. I've done it since I was a child. That's many times how people learn about mushrooms, through the peer-to-peer, colleague-to-colleague, or intergenerational oral tradition, right? And that's certainly how I learned. My parents were equally kooky mushroom foragers, if you can imagine. So I got started with my son, Mason. Here he is, the third generation mushroom forager. And he's a wee thing here. He has a large morel in one hand, and in the other hand, he has a pacifier. He's now 22. He just turned 22 last week, and he goes to college in Colorado, and he's still a really good mushroom hunter. In fact, he told me the other day, he goes, Mom, you know that game that they play where you go around and you do the icebreaker and you say something that people don't know about you? And I go, oh, yeah, I know that game. He goes, I tell everybody that I'm a forager and there's a book named after me. And they all go, you're lying. Right? So this is Mason Goes Mushrooming, and it's about my son, Mason, and it's about his adventures looking for wild mushrooms in our small town in Vermont as a child. So, and then when I was reading to him as a kid, I found that there was no books about mushroom foraging for children, remember, because we've taught we can't learn about it, right? For some unknown reason. So what I did was I wrote this book, and I now go around the country teaching wild mushroom foraging all over to mostly children. So this is me and my family when we were much younger, and we would go out every Sunday morning with our local mushroom club. It's called the Monadnock Mushroom Club, and I'm now still a member of it 20-something years later. And every Sunday morning, this summer we did 16 walks at 10 o'clock on Sunday, totally free. It's $15 a year to join. So 88 cents a walk is the way we describe it. And other people might call it something else. We called it church, all right? You go out into the woods, Sunday from 10 to 12. It's a completely spiritual, present, connected activity to do with your family. Now I do the same thing with kids in schools all over the place, trying to dispel this myth that mushrooms are somehow not available to us or not supposed to be learned about. It's actually quite the opposite. And when you're out in the woods with kids like this, first of all, kids are amazing mushroom foragers. They're really close to the ground. They still have good eyesight. They're super enthusiastic. They think it's a treasure hunt, an Easter egg hunt, or something just like that, looking for seashells at the beach. And they get really into it, and they remember the names of things a lot better than grown-ups do. So kids are super fun to take out in the woods with you, and they will become enthusiastic about the littlest thing. So, for example, this is my daughter, Allie, finding a hidden black trumpet. And if you look at the picture carefully, you can see how those black trumpets blend in with the leaves, right? So she actually just recently wrote her college essay. She's at school down at Wake Forest. And they ask you the question, what is your superpower, right? And she wrote that her superpower is identifying culinary mushrooms in the woods. And I thought, oh, score one for mom, right? So she's out there looking for wild trumpets. And when you find a mushroom like this in the woods that you're really hunting for and you're super excited about, there's this sort of like endorphin rush. It's like this wow moment, right? Like, I found the thing I'm hunting for. It's almost as good as finding your car keys when you've lost them, right? Not quite, you need to get out of the garage, but it does come with it this sense of adventure and surprise that keeps all of us kooky foragers coming back and back for more. The other thing about going out in the woods with kids and big kids, i.e. grownups, is that you never know what you're going to find. And that's the joy of foraging, is the element of surprise. And in this picture here, you're obviously not just going to find mushrooms. I mean, what is that cool creature? You pick up the mushroom and all of the information on a mushroom is underneath it, right? If somebody sends me pictures of mushrooms and they send me just the top brown top of it, I go, that's some bald guy's head. I need to see their face, right? So the face of a mushroom is underneath where all of the information is contained. And those characteristics, in this case, the gills, those are all identifying clues to what that mushroom is. But this little creature here, he just showed up and we sat and looked at him for a while. And if we hadn't been out in the woods, we would have never met him. And I still to this day don't know exactly what he is, except he seems like he came back from the prehistoric age, doesn't he, somehow? But it tickles all of your senses to be in the woods foraging. You have to obviously use your eyes in a way that makes you extremely present. You have to use your sense of smell when you're hunting for wild mushrooms because all mushrooms smell different. You must use your sense of touch because every mushroom has its own feeling to it. And obviously your sense of taste if you're trying different wild mushrooms. And then the aspect of hearing is actually quite present when you're in the woods because you're hearing the crinkling of the leaves and the swish of the trees and everything else. And you're really immersed in that sense of nature. So foraging offers us this at any given opportunity. The other thing it offers is by searching in this way and being really present and connected, you can teach kids about so many different things. And in this instance, when I go out foraging, I take a bag like this and I put a second bag into it. And that second bag is the bag that we use for the trash. And that's part of what I teach is that when you go out in the woods, you definitely want to leave the woods nicer than you found them, right? Because mushrooms at their core, what they teach us is about connectivity, right? Since mushrooms are all connected underground through the mycelial network, in order to exist, for the mushrooms to exist, they have to stay interconnected, both to the trees, to the land, to the sun, to the rain, to everything, right? So mushrooms at their core teach us about connectivity. And I think that that's why everybody these days is so concerned and interested about the world of mycology, because there's a lot there for us to learn about how to stay connected. And mycology offers us that in a really deep way, more so than many other sciences and tenets. So the other thing about the connectivity that you can see when you're out there, in this case, for example, you've got a mushroom chanterelles growing in the shape of a fairy ring. I don't know if folks are familiar with this. You see it quite often in the fungal universe. These mushrooms are following their food source, which is the tree roots, right? So they're having a symbiotic relationship with the tree that's completely underground and unseen to our eyes, except when those mushrooms fruit, right? So these mushrooms are fruiting as a way to show you, if you're really present and foraging and aware, that they represent what's going on underneath the world in their natural habitat. Almost like if you went scuba diving and you were able to look down under the water, these mushrooms are showing you what's going on underneath. And as a forager, I'm out there and like sort of my mind is blown. I'm like, wow, I just seeing a beautiful circular, mushroom ring that just speaks to such a depth of connectivity that's going on under the ground. The other thing that obviously mushroom foraging can lead to is cooking. Cooking, which is another form of deep connectivity, I think probably our most everyday form when we have a dinner party or we cook together or we go and have lunch with a friend or we go to the bar for drinks and snacks. Food is our most everyday activity that provides us connectivity on an everyday basis. And mushrooms as a cooking activity is one of the funnest ways to dive into new types of taste experiences. For example, what I recommend, and we would be doing this if I could do a cooking demo, is like a sommelier experience of cooking mushrooms. You go to the grocery store and you forage at the grocery store, right? You get some of the mushrooms that are available right there. Anyway, I have them over at my table. Lion's mane and shiitake and baby bellows and portobellos and oyster mushrooms. These are all ubiquitous at the grocery store now. And you can get them, they're practically the same price as the white button mushrooms. And you can have a mushroom tasting. You just fry them up in butter and taste the different types of mushrooms and figure out which ones you like. Figure out the umami flavor that most suits your palate. And make sure when you cook mushrooms, this is a pro tip, make sure to crisp them up. Because for people who don't like mushrooms, what do they usually not like about them? Their texture. That's exactly right. Yeah, people don't like the texture. I don't like the texture of a mushy mushroom either. No, it's a bad look, right? Nobody should eat mushy mushrooms. So cut them up in a nice way and treat them like you would meat, which is to say, give them a nice sear on the outside, a nice browning, finish with a little bit of salt, but have the looser texture just be in the middle where it can still be somewhat juicy. Or make them into crisps or chips and really keep them nice and small and just get the nice crunch and crisp. So those are ways of getting a really good flavor out of mushrooms, even for people that say they don't like them. If you cook them right, you can really convert even the least ambitious mushroom eater out there. And that's not to mention the fact that they're super nutritious, right? I am not a nutritional person, but I can tell you that mushrooms have, depending on different types of mushrooms, not only do they have incredible medicinal and supplemental values, but they also have proteins and vitamins and incredible minerals and no calories, lots of water, obviously. So they're a very, very good addition to any diet. And if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, obviously they fit in perfectly. And if you are foraging in your local area and you get mushrooms from the woods that you're from, you have this advantage of eating the food that's grown in the natural environment of where you're from. So the analogy that I like to make is if you go to a place that has drinking water that they say is not potable for you, like for us in the US, if we go to Mexico, we have to drink the bottled water because otherwise we'll get, sometimes very serious stomach problems. Oh, thank you. Okay. Wow, I just stand here and take money. But the folks who live there, they can drink it just fine. Why is this? It's because their gut has the right mycorrhizal environment, mycological and in every other way fungal and bacterial environment to deal with those different things that are in the water. But ours doesn't, because ours is dealing with what we have at home, right? So when you go in the woods and you eat mushrooms from your own woods, by default, you are getting the microbes and the good immunity and the good natural resistance that are in your environment, because mushrooms are always going to have a little bit of dirt and microbes on them, which is why you should cook them. But they're always going to be involved in the environment of where they're in. So it's very, very healthy to eat mushrooms from where you live. And I highly recommend that. And I never get sick, so I'm pretty sure that's why. Here we have a picture of my friend Senji, and he's picking his first morel. One of the things that I like to teach is that interacting with nature at any age is pretty critical. And I know that for many of you, you're aware of, the power of that little square thing in your pocket and, the pros and the cons, right? And I'm not going to proselytize on that. I'm just going to remind everybody that you can always return to nature to regain your sense of place and regain your sense of connection, whether it's you know, with the folks the people that you're doing it with the land around you. It's there. It's there for the taking. So whenever I'm needing a break or having a bad day, whatever, I happen to live at the edge of the woods, and I will just grab our dog and say, we're going into woods. It doesn't take more than 15 minutes for like a regrounding to happen. It's a literal and a physical and a metaphysical regrounding that comes from being out in nature. And it's free, obviously. It's a wonderful intergenerational activity. You can go with old people and you can go with little babes in arms and babes on your back, right? So the thing that I love about foraging in general is you can also do it anywhere. So here in the streets of Montreal or the woods of the hills or the parks or the meadows, mushrooms are everywhere, literally everywhere. And when you develop what I call mushroom eyes, you'll start to see them in a way that you never saw before because they are everywhere and because you've now been given permission to touch them. The other thing that mushrooms are great for is art. I always like to touch on that. I teach a lot of art, and this is kids taking watercolors and taking using the mushrooms as still lifes. But there is something inherently and intrinsically beautiful about the fruiting body of mushrooms. So they speak somehow, I think, to our sort of primordial artistic person, right? And I will often have a table set up for kids with art, and grown-ups will pull up. And if you provide the prepared environment for them and just say, you know, sit down and do some art with us, the grown-ups also get really into it. It's sort of permission to play, right? And the playfulness that mushrooms provide. You might not know, although you might, is that fungi are everywhere, right? So this idea that we shouldn't interact with them or touch them is particularly debunked when you think about how they show up in your everyday life. So a couple examples here in this picture. So they're in the yeast in your bread. They make all of your baked goods rise. They're in the molds in your cheese or any other cheese that you eat. They help with the fermentation process. They're in your yogurts. They're the process of the yogurt making. They're in your booze and your alcohol. They make all of your wine that you want to drink. They're all of the natural good bacteria that's in your gut, which we already talked about. They're also in all of your medicines, your penicillins, and your other medicines that are derived from mushrooms. And of course, they're in your hallucinogenic psilocybins, should you care to go down that road, and also in many other medicinal medicines that folks are using for teas and tinctures and supplements. So the way that mushrooms are showing up in our lives at this point is huge. And for some people, that's a bit of a revelation. Like they didn't know, for example, that they're responsible for most everything that you interact with all day long. Like, who knew, right? So I love this picture. This little feller at a Montessori school out in California is having his first experience smelling a chanterelle, right? And what I like to do with smelling mushrooms is sort of like what you might do with a wine, where you swirl around and then you go, oh, I get the essence of chocolate, whatever. Mushrooms have that same capacity, and every mushroom has a very different smell. And when you're identifying mushrooms, often if you look in the guidebooks or people say, they will tell you what that specific smell is, and then you will know it as you smell it. You'll be like, oh, I know that smell. That's matsutake. That is so unmistakably stinky sneaker. And you just know when you pick it, like that's what that is, and you can't unsmell it after you've smelled it, right? So the tickling of the five senses is a particularly important part of the foraging experience. The other thing that I like to do is invite people and inspire people to join mushroom clubs, right? So Montreal has mushroom clubs, obviously. There's mushroom clubs online, which lead to outdoor mushroom clubs. There's the gal who spoke earlier has a paid mushroom experience, and it's only $30. You can go out with people who can do all sorts of teaching. I really highly recommend going out with people who know what they're doing, mostly because it is a confidence booster. It's obviously safer, and you'll learn a whole lot more than if you try to go home, you know, with a table of this variety and try to figure out what everything is. If you have a mushroom expert there or somebody who can do good identification, they can go through this table with you and sort of help to understand what some of these things are. And the most important thing is with mushroom categorizing is to begin with the actual genus of the mushroom, right? And then get into the species and the more specific, you know, Latin words and so on. But the genuses are going to be based on that characteristic that's underneath them. And once you figure out, is this a gilled mushroom? Is it a spongy mushroom? Is it a toothed mushroom? Is it a polypore, which has like a little million pores in it? What type of genus is it? And then you can start to separate them out. So you sort of start on a big scale and you work your way in. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed or you know, don't feel invited into the world of mycology because it feels like you have to learn all of these mushrooms. Nothing could be further from the truth. I learn one mushroom a year. That's about what my brain can handle. I like to learn them from someone else, and then I get confident in that one mushroom, and then I move on to another one, right? And if you're out mushroom hunting, you really only need to learn the mushroom that you're hunting for. You don't need to know the other 2,000 different varieties out there because they're not that one, right? So in my book, I have beginner mushrooms. I'm just going to talk for 1 sec about what a beginner mushroom is. So this is the lobster mushroom, and it's bright, bright orange, and it is unmistakable for any other mushroom. So we call that a beginner mushroom. This is a black trumpet mushroom, the one that you saw the picture of, also unmistakable for any other mushroom. The morel, obviously, is one of the easiest beginner mushrooms. It only comes up for 2 weeks in the spring, and it's very identifiable by the types of trees that it's growing around, usually elm or apple or ash. So that's what I would recommend. Find mushrooms that you have gone to with other people, spots you've gone to, and learn one at a time. And as you're learning one at a time, you'll probably learn a few more just by accident, you know? But try to keep it realistic and small and build on your knowledge, and definitely, definitely go out with a mushroom club. The other thing I like to do is I teach fairy house building and centerpiece making. So this is an example of where you can go out in the woods, not with the intention of eating anything, but simply to look for the beauty in the mushrooms and bring them back and then make a gorgeous centerpiece. So I know you all just had Thanksgiving. For us, it's coming up, but I always go out in the woods. I get a beautiful bit of moss, and in this case, a little violet rimmed polypore. You can see that violet rim on that polypore growing on a log. Put some ferns around it, put it in the middle of the centerpiece, and voila, you have a really nice looking free nature inside on your table experience. The last thing I want to talk about is all of the ways in which mushrooms can teach children. And in this instance, this little guy out in California is learning how to make a mushroom pasta dish, which is in my book. So not only is he learning how to cook and learning his mushrooms, but he's also learning knife skills and searing skills and presentation skills. So all of this can be brought into the world of foraging well beyond just being out in the woods. You know, he's already had a whole other experience layered onto this. So I like to think of mushrooms as being an access point to a million opportunities of art, of writing, of photography. Oh, taking pictures of mushrooms is so fun. Being out in nature, of creating food. And this food creation easily can start at the grocery store. It does not need to start out in the wild. You know, again, starting with one thing at a time, finding out which mushrooms you like. So one of the things I wanted to do is open it up to a few questions. We do have some time, and I know from experience that people have questions about mushroom foraging that they were afraid to ask. So like, as an example, you know, can you touch mushrooms? I get that at every talk, right? And to me, I'm like, absolutely great question. okay? Because we've been taught the opposite our entire lives. So everybody should have that question. So I'd like to just open it up to any questions that you might have specific to my lane. If I don't know the answer, I'm pretty quick to be the first to tell you I don't know the answer, but I probably will know where to find it. And also about my book and the writing of my book, or any questions you might have about reading to children and where to, accessing mushroom information, either for yourselves or for other generations. So I'm thrilled to see so many people here and see the enthusiasm at this show. But any questions at all about anything you saw or anything at all for me? This is like, you sort of can play like Stump the Chump kind of thing. Yeah.
Just raise your hand if you have any questions, and I'll run a microphone over to you, and I'll just mention anyone on Zoom, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll read them out.
Yeah. No, I covered a lot of information, and so I'm really open to starting a bit of a dialogue and conversation here.
Do we have any questions? Oh, we have one here.
Nick had one, and then there's one up here.
I may have missed it. You may have already said, but do you do much work with schools?
Schools?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably most of what I do.
All right.
Yeah, I go to schools all around the country.
And what age group do you?
So that's a great question. What age group? If it's a little bitty group, I usually do a read aloud. And then, that's about what they can handle, with a little bit of a Q&A at the end. And they ask really good questions like, or we talk about how old Mason is and things like that. And then if it's a middle age group, I usually do a little teeny bit about the book, and then I do some art or some cooking. And if it's a middle school and above to college, if I'm outdoors, I love to take them on a foray. What I really love to do is cooking. I like to teach mushroom cooking with them. So I'm sort of a bit of a one woman band there. Whatever the best way is in with those kids, whatever age group.
So the older kids are sneaking in questions about psilocybin.
Oh, so questions about psilocybin. You don't have to sneak them in. You can ask. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the older kids.
Yeah, no, I love questions about psilocybin. So I am a equal opportunity mushroom enthusiast. I think psilocybin is the bomb. And obviously when I'm teaching kids out at schools and so on, I'm not going to say it quite like that. But I'm very enthusiastic and excited about the potential use with anything to do with depression, anxiety, microdosing on a daily basis to replace antidepressants. I think the research is absolutely extraordinary that's going on right now. I have a friend named Lauren Aldifer, who's published with the same publishers I am in Brattleboro, who just wrote a book called The Microdosing Journal, which I highly recommend. Sort of a guided journal to starting that process in your own life. I'm super excited for it to become more legit as it is up here. Yeah, I mean, whether if you're enjoying a music festival or you're trying to, get over your anxiety for your upcoming stats test, whatever, it's all good. Obviously, when I'm talking to young kids, they do more like joking around about, magic mushrooms, and that's okay, fine. I do, obviously I'm not going to go out in the world and tell everybody to do illegal things, as it is still the case in the US, but am I excited about the research? You bet. You bet. There's a question here.
There was a question right up front.
Yeah.
Hi. What's like a good entry point, or what would you suggest for someone who's really interested in mushrooms but doesn't know where to start?
Great. I love this question. What's a good entrance point? Where's my best access for me personally? So I have about 10 answers to this, so I'm going to sort of rattle some off. The mushroom clubs, for that community of kooky foragers that I just described, foragers learn to forage from another forager 99% of the time, right? We are eager and happy, and in fact, want to share that knowledge, person to person, peer to peer, colleague to colleague. It's been the most citizen shared science of any of them because it was never funded. And in fact, as we remember, it was never taught. So how did all these people learn how to mushroom and mushroom hunt? They learned from each other, right? So we as amateur mycologists and regular mycologists are very adherent to this idea that this is a shared science and ought to be shared, right? So at my mushroom club, which you saw the big table of one day, you know, we get around at the end and we stand around the table and we identify the mushrooms together. And that shared knowledge is so much greater than the sum of its parts, you know? I learn something at every single walk. And part of mushroom hunting is being very humble and having a lot of humility about what you don't know, because you don't know nothing. You know nothing. You know 1/1,000,000th of what there is to learn out there. No matter where you begin, the science is so vast that you can't. So you just don't measure it that way. Measure it with like the one at a time thing, or I went on one foray and I loved it. And now I'm more interested, right? So try to start small and simple and don't overwhelm yourself. That's the first thing. The second is iNaturalist is a fantastic website. If you don't have it, if you don't have the app on your phone, it's free. I recommend downloading it right now on the Wi-Fi. It's the letter I in the word naturalist. And you can upload any photograph, mushrooms, trees, plants, animals. I mean, they have it all, anything in the natural world. And the citizen scientists will comment on it. So, you know, they want to know where you found it, under what circumstances, what they want to see a picture of the top, the side, and the middle, which we talked about. But iNaturalist will give you a really nice response from the community. So, and then also all of the Facebook pages and the Facebook communities, certainly in Vermont, they're fabulous. You can upload photographs and people will comment on what it is. And then going to events like this, I mean, the fact that you're here today is remarkable. Like, give yourself a pat on the back. That's amazing. I'm sure all of you are learning a ton just being here around this. I know I am. I listened to someone talks earlier and they were amazing. So yeah, you're doing all the things. I don't recommend trying to identify mushrooms with only a book or the internet. I think that's, it can be helpful, but it's not the be all and the end all. For one thing, it's one-dimensional. And we talked earlier about how important it is to have the 5 senses involved. And if you have a one-dimensional thing, you only have one sense involved. You only have your eyes. You don't have touch, you don't have smell, you don't have taste. So you can't really get the full flavor, literal flavor, with just the one dimension. So that's the only sort of caveat I would give. Yes, there was a hand up over here. I hope I answered that for you. There's one there, and then there was the, okay. This is the one I saw first, and then we'll do that one.
I'm coming around.
All right.
Okay. Who was first?
The gal right here. Yep.
Is there a beginner's book for a mushroom you recommend?
A beginner's book I recommend. Well, I recommend my book, but a beginner's book that I really like. There's which is good for this area too. There's a fellow called David Fisher, and he's written a book called Wild Mushrooms of North America, and it's an edible field guide. And it has beautiful photographs and it has recipes, and I just love the way he writes. Well, I have a bunch of books I recommend. I really love Merlin Sheldrake's Entangled Life. I don't know if any of you have read it, but it's not a mushroom identification book, but it is a book about the power of mushrooms in a whole different variety of chapters that describe everything from, there's, you know, psilocybin to industrial uses to environmental uses, and it's written beautifully. And if you like listening to Audible, he has a gorgeous accent. I think he's Scottish, and it's just, and he writes just so melodically. So I really loved Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. And then for other ID books, anything by Alan Bassett, anything by Noah Siegel. I mean, these are all sort of like the all-stars. There's a list of all-stars. Obviously, Paul Stamets, you know, they're all, any of the top, you know, 5 mycologists who have written books, all those books are phenomenal. Yes, gentlemen.
I actually have 2 questions. So the first one, when you go out foraging, do you have any rule of thumbs on how much of the fruiting body you should pick so that the colony still has some left to spread its spore?
Do you want to ask him the second one too? I can remember.
Oh, yeah. And the second question is, if you do end up picking a poisonous mushroom and you bring it home, what do you do with that?
These are both great questions, and they're related. So, on the science of picking, people are a little bit split on this, all right? I fall into the camp of believing that mushrooms are like apples. So if you go to an apple tree and you pick all the apples, it's not really going to affect the number of apples in the world, right? It's the same thing with mushrooms. My personal belief is that we can't possibly impact the billions and billions of spores that are floating around in the forest. It's not scientifically or statistically possible, because every square inch of the forest is covered in mushrooms. Every inch of it, whether it's on a tree or under the ground, whatever, they're everywhere. So if we pick a patch on a mountain, it's just not going to make a difference. It's like if you go into the ocean and you take out a cup of salt water, it's not going to make a difference, right? Because you're not impacting the mycelial structure that's going on underneath. Now, when you go into a forest and you deforest it from its trees, you're making a big old difference. That's making a difference. But I don't believe that picking a mushroom in and of itself is going to have a big impact on the fungi of the universe, because it's the fruiting body. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And that's also somewhat anecdotal. Like, I have patches of mushrooms that I go to year after year after year, where I pick every damn last one of them because I'm going to get those mushrooms. And the following year, there may be none and there may be tons. And it depends on two things having nothing to do with what I picked. What are the two things mushrooms need? What do they need to grow? Water. They need rain. What's the other thing they need? Sun. Yes, the heat, right? So they need a warm temperature or a temperature that's right for them, and they need water, right? So in my patch, let's say my black trumpet patch, this year, not so good. Why? Not because I picked last year, because I picked last year like crazy, because last year was fabulous, right? But because we didn't have much rain. So next year, if we have a really, really rainy year, when I go to my black trumpet patch, there's going to be a lot of black trumpets, right? And I know this from going to that patch for 20 years, right? And that there's only two things that impact that black trumpet patch. The most biggest thing is the rain, by far. And then going on to the question about when you pick a poisonous mushroom by accident and you mix it in your bag by accident, right? That's what you're asking? Okay, so just a little bit of etiquette on hunting for mushrooms when you're hunting for edible mushrooms, and you're also hunting for mushrooms that you're going to identify, right? So if you're hunting for black trumpets, let's say, and they're very easy to identify, right? So you have your basket of black trumpets, and that's all you put in there. And then you have a separate basket or a separate baggie or something else for another mushroom that you pick and you want to identify when you go home, right? That's the best way to do that, right? But if you're picking a whole bunch of mushrooms and you're mushing them together in a bag, I would call that an ID walk, right? Where you're just going to be identifying all those mushrooms. Try to keep them separate. If you do mix in, like I've picked chanterelles before, and then there's been a brown mushroom mixed in there that's not one of them, that's fine. You throw it out, right? The thing that you want to avoid is picking like, a huge patch of amanitas or, false chanterelles or something and mixing them in and then trying to figure out which is which. Don't do that. That's not a good look. Yeah. So the only way that would happen is if you were picking ID mushrooms and edible mushrooms at the same time. And I would say good etiquette is to keep them separate. Any other questions? These are all awesome. Yes.
Let me bring a mic over.
Do you have any tips for convincing parents that it's safe and worthwhile to let their kids touch mushrooms?
So I'm getting a lot of traffic.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Do you have any tips for convincing parents who are a
Oh,
little
yes.
hesitant to let their kids touch mushrooms?
Well, it's not just parents. The question is, how do you talk to people about, being able to touch mushrooms after they've been told their entire lives that they can't? And they've also been telling everybody else that they can't, right? It's not just that we learned that, but then we're also guilty of passing on that misinformation. It's bad science, right? Basically, but how do we know? Nobody stood up there and told us that that was bad science. That's what we were told our entire lives, right? So what I do with that is just try to, create a different version of reality for them. The best way is to have them, so I'll do we touch things all day that we don't eat. Name me something that you touch today that you don't eat. Anything. Your what? Wallet. Your wallet. Yeah, I touch my wallet all day. I don't eat it. Your detergent, your toothpaste, your laundry soap, your jeans, your car door, whatever. You touch things all day long, you don't eat, right? So I try to reframe it into this idea that why can you touch laundry detergent? That's actually, or glue, like you're doing a collage. What do you do afterwards? Well, you wash your hands, right? So if you go out in the woods and you're touching soil and you're touching a lot of different mushrooms, just like if you're gardening or fishing or hunting or doing any outdoor activity, what do you do when you come in? You wash your hands, right? Not a big deal. So I try to bring it down to the level of how we interact with most things that we don't eat and have people understand that basically they've been fed mycophobia in a very big way. I have a really quick story about this. I have a friend who's an ER doctor in New Hampshire. And I said to him, I said, H, how many mushroom poisonings have you had at the ER? And he said, I really can't think of any. I said, how many fishing accidents have you had? He goes, oh my God, I had 3 this week. So nobody's out there telling you shouldn't go fishing because you can get a hook stuck in your finger or God forbid your eye, which happens all the time. But you can't go out and touch mushrooms. It's just weird. People are weird, right? So yeah, I try to bring it back to reality. Yeah.
Hi. As someone who's interested in studying mycology, do you have any advice or ideas on where to start or what kind of maybe places that would have programs for that? Or
mycology programs. I don't know. Do you all have one here? No. Okay. My point. This is where we started today.
Oh,
they're denying this to you. Y'all should have an uprising. I'm not even kidding you. Jeez, there's no mycology courses, just like every other college. Yeah, there's no mycology courses. I know. We should be irritated. I am.
There's an online one at UVic, actually.
I missed that.
University of Victoria in British Columbia.
Oh, online. Yeah.
Online,
So like I said earlier, online is a great starting point, access point. But what you're doing here right now is the best. Go to festivals, meet people, talk to other kooky, enthusiastic mushroom foragers, and learn about where you can go and where you can team up with other groups that are going out. It should be free or relatively free. It should be accessible. I don't mean to use the word should, but that's the ethos, right? Is that we're sharing. We're not trying to capitalize on this. We're sharing the information freely, accessibly, and availably to everyone. And last couple of questions. Yes, in the back. As you can see, I'm very hearing compromised by the other side going on here.
Hi, so I'm a little bit more curious about medicinal mushrooms and if you have any beginner friendly mushrooms that we can forage here in North America.
Medicinal mushrooms?
Yeah.
Yeah. So medicinal mushrooms are not my lane. However, I know enough to be dangerous. I think that chaga and reishi, there was a nice big piece of chaga at the table next to me out front, so you can see that. And reishi are also very easy to identify. They're the big ones that look like they have varnish on the top of them that are growing out of stumps and trees that are dead and dying. Like I said, medicinal mushrooms are not my field of expertise, but I see a lot of them because I'm out in the woods a lot. So they're not that hard to learn. They're actually fairly easy to learn. What to do with them in terms of drying and tincturing and making oils and essences and making supplements, all that, I know less than nothing. So, and teas, all those things. Most of those mushrooms are not edible in the sense of you're not gonna like cook them up in a frying pan and eat them, but they are medicinal, right? So and most mushrooms, by the way, are not poisonous. Most mushrooms are just inedible, meaning they don't taste good. I have a category I call grass, right? Grass is like something that you can walk on and you could chew on or whatever. You could even eat it if you wanted to, but why would you? Because it doesn't taste good, right? It's not gonna hurt you. You can eat it all day long. It's not gonna hurt you. But why would you do it, right? That's what most mushrooms fall into the category of. They just don't taste good. Or they're stocky, or they're hard like rocks. They're growing. They're like those mushrooms. You're not going to want to eat like a choice mushroom, because why would you? Yeah, yeah.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's called Mason Goes Mushrooming. And it's got all sorts of stuff on it to do. It's got photographs. It's got a read aloud. It's got curriculum for young kids. It has my upcoming events, press. It's got my TED Talk, which is very similar to the talk that you heard earlier, but a little bit more focused on the environment. No, it's this. It's my book, Mason Goes Mushrooming. Yeah. And Mason is my actual son. Any last questions? You guys have been a phenomenal audience. I just can't thank you enough for the engagement. And my heart is so warm and full to see that this many people are this excited about foraging up here in Montreal. And feel free to come to my table in the front and chat with me. And I also have books available. And yeah. Yeah, in cities. Yeah, so I was talking to this gal over here earlier. There's been a sort of a crackdown on folks going out and looking for mushrooms, and I don't really understand it because, like I said, it's not particularly scientific that it's going to hurt the environment, but there's this idea of sort of leaving a place untouched. And I do understand letting other people see the mushrooms. It's like picking the tulips in Central Park. It's kind of frowned upon, like that's not really very nice. So there is a little bit of that. I don't really understand it when it's like out in hiking places where there's thousands of acres, and yeah, I don't really get that. But that's coming apparently, and certainly in the West Coast of the U.S., there's lots and lots of rules around foraging, and it's kind of a bummer. Where I am from in New Hampshire and Vermont, nobody could care less where you forage. It's not even a thing. Nobody cares.
Really absorbed in the mushroom.
Oh, pollution. Yeah, so pollution and mushrooms. So I have thoughts on this, as you can imagine. There's certain places that you shouldn't forage. Golf courses, sometimes people are like, there's a lot of chemicals on those, try to stay away from that. Of course, I see a big, huge mushroom on a golf course. I'm like, to hell with it, I'm picking it. But golf courses, the sides of railroad tracks, because they use some sort of chemical on the railroad beds to keep the weeds from going. There's talk of arsenic in the apple orchards from previous spraying that used to go on. My personal feeling is in the woods, you're fine. Like if you're even the woods of a park, if they're not doing if they're not eradicating knotweed or something, like you're probably fine. I think you're going to get more chemicals on your grapes at the supermarket, if you want to know my honest opinion. I mean, spray on fruit is going to be way more than anything that can be absorbed in a small, tiny amount in a mushroom. And also, you're not going to be eating, like grapes, you might eat kind of daily or 2 or 3 times a week. But mushrooms like that you pick, I mean, what, a few times a year if you're lucky, you know? So unless you're a forager like me and you're going out all the time, but I'm going out in woods that are pristine, untouched woods, you know? So I think it's a little bit contextual, and I'd be much more worried about stuff that's actually farm harvested than I would from anything in the wild, personally. I hope that that's helpful. Again, some of these are very opinion, like not necessarily science, but just my opinion, just quantifying that. All right, like I said, if anybody has questions and wants to come talk to me, I am here. So thank you again for having me. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Melany. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming in to Forest Space. Thank you for joining us here at Fungi Fest Montreal. There were some nice comments in the chat. Also, just to let you know, we're going to be closing up the Zoom and the live stream now, but this remains, all the talks from today actually remain available on our YouTube channel, so you can revisit them there. But the rest of the day, we're still open for the market is here, and there's some other things happening, so stick around. Talk to Melany. Thanks, everyone. Bye.